Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step softly into a medieval town before sunrise when the rooftops are still black against the pale edge of morning. The lanes are slick with yesterday's rain, and the air carries a smell so ancient and so human that your modern nose immediately files a complaint. You stand near a narrow alley, close to a timber house that leans as if it has been awake too long. And somewhere below your boots, beneath boards and packed earth, the city's private business waits in darkness. And yes, you probably won't survive this with your dignity fully intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you are listening from and what the local time is where you are. Maybe it is midnight in Manila, tea time in Toronto, or a sleepy little hour somewhere in between. Now dim the lights, and let yourself arrive in a world where every grand castle, every painted church, every bustling market, and every respectable household depends on someone willing to deal with what everyone else refuses to mention. You are not entering the shining version of the Middle Ages tonight. Not the tournament field, not the candlelit banquet, not the tapestry full of graceful ladies and suspiciously clean knights. You are entering the part of history that usually stays under the floorboards. The town is still sleeping, but it is not silent. A dog noses through straw near a doorway. Somewhere a rooster makes an early self-important announcement. Water drips from a thatched eave into a wooden gutter. Behind a shutter, someone coughs. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, not because the air is cold exactly, but because the damp seems to settle into everything. Wool, hair, skin, mood, medieval weather does not politely remain outside. You breathe in carefully and regret it. The smell is layered like a very unfortunate stew. Wood smoke hangs low from hearth fires banked overnight. There is wet straw in the street, sour beer from an alehouse yard animal, dung from horses and pigs, old fish from the market tallow, smoke from cheap candles, and beneath it all that warm, heavy note, rising from latrines, drains, and cesspits. It is not a single smell. It is the town's memory fermenting. In this place, waste is not hidden by porcelain pipes and a polite flush. It is managed, shifted, buried, sold, dumped, argued over, and sometimes simply ignored until it becomes impossible to ignore. A mainstream fact worth settling gently into the room is this. Many medieval European towns used cesspits, latrines, open drains, and street gutters long before modern sewer systems became common. The Romans had built impressive urban sanitation in some places, but after their empire changed and fragmented, many towns relied on more local patchwork arrangements. Some were clever, some were horrifying. Most were both depending on where you stood. And tonight you are standing in the wrong place. You are awake because the town prefers this kind of work to happen before decent people are fully looking. Respectability then as now has a talent for arranging its comforts just out of sight. By daylight the baker will lift warm loaves from the oven, apprentices will shout, merchants will haggle, bells will ring for prayer, and people will step carefully around puddles while pretending that the world is orderly. But in the deep hours before the first serious bustle, another economy moves through the lanes. Quiet carts, covered buckets, men with spades and hooks, men who know where the hidden pits are, how full they have become, and which household has waited too long to pay. You are beginning to understand a simple truth. A city is not only built upward in towers and roofs and church spires, it is also built downward into pits, holes, ditches, and dark chambers where the evidence of ordinary life gathers. Every meal has an afterlife. Every feast, every fast, every cup of ale, every thick pottage of beans and onions, every slice of coarse bread. Every little luxury imported from far away eventually joins the same democratic underworld. There is a strange comfort in that, perhaps, or perhaps not. This is bedtime history after all, not bedtime denial. You move along the lane, keeping near the wall where the ground is slightly firmer. Medieval streets can be paved in wealthier places, especially important roads and market areas, but many are uneven, muddy and cluttered. In some towns, householders are responsible for keeping the frontage near their homes in decent condition, though decent is doing heroic work as a word. Rain carries filth downhill, pigs root through refuse, chickens scratch, people toss water from basins. Sometimes the water is merely dirty. Sometimes, dear listener, it is not merely dirty. Above you, upper stories jut outward, narrowing the strip of sky. The houses seem to lean toward each other, as though exchanging gossip about the people inside. Timber frames creak softly. Wattle and door walls hold warmth where they can. Behind these walls, families sleep in crowded rooms, servants curled near hearths, apprentices under blankets, children packed together for warmth. There may be a chamber pot beneath a bed, there may be a privy out back, there may be a shared latrine somewhere nearby. Privacy exists, but it is not quite the private privacy you know. Sound travels, smell travels better. A quirky little tidbit waits here in the half-dark in some medieval and early modern towns. People could be fined for dumping waste in the wrong place at the wrong time, or too close to a neighbour's property. Rules existed because problems existed. The law did not always mean people behaved beautifully, which will shock no one who has ever seen a modern sign saying "do not litter" beside a pile of litter. Human nature, it seems, has always needed reminders. You pass a doorway marked by a small religious image, perhaps a saint painted, or carved near the entrance. The sacred and the filthy lie close together here. Bells call souls towards a heaven, while gutters carry earthly evidence in the other direction. It would be easy to laugh at medieval people and imagine them careless, but that would be unfair and a little lazy. They know bad smells are unpleasant. They know rot can make you sick, even if they explain sickness through ideas of corrupted air imbalance, divine judgment, or unlucky conditions rather than microbes. They wash hands, rinse vessels, sweep floors, regulate trade to move dung heaps and complain about neighbours. They are not fools. They are simply living before the invisible world of bacteria has been properly understood. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly as filthy as popular imagination suggests, or whether later writers exaggerated the stink to make the past seem darker than it was. The answer softly and inconveniently is probably yes to both. Some places were better managed than others. Some seasons were worse. Some neighbourhoods were kept cleaner because wealth and authority insisted upon it. Some corners were neglected until the air itself seemed tired. The past was not one smell, one street, one condition. It was 1,000 little arrangements, some practical, some desperate, some surprisingly sensible. Still, as you pause beside a covered pit in a back courtyard, you do not feel like praising urban management. The boards over the opening are damp. A faint warmth rises through the cracks. This is where polite life empties itself and waits. It waits beneath kitchens where onions simmer beneath chambers where merchants count coins, beneath rented rooms where travellers sleep after paying for ale and straw. It waits until someone like you comes with a cart and a lantern. You have not yet taken up the trade, not fully. For now you are only arriving at its edge, letting the town reveal why such work exists. You are seeing the problem before you become the solution. And what a solution! Not glamorous, not admired, not suitable for a romantic ballad unless the minstrel has lost a bet, but necessary, because every society has hidden labour. Every age has people who clean what others leave behind, carry what others do not want to touch, and make comfort possible, without being invited to enjoy much of it. In this medieval town, beneath the sleepy roofs and soft church bells, the hidden labour begins before dawn. A shutter opens above you. Someone peers down, sees the cart waiting in the alley and closes it again quickly. Perhaps they are embarrassed, perhaps relieved, perhaps both. The town does not want to look too closely at the work ahead, but it needs it done all the same. So you stand in the dimness, breathing shallowly, listening to the slow waking of animals and people and bells. The sky lightens by a shade. The pit waits below. The city above pretends to sleep for just a little longer. You remain in the alley as the town breathes itself slowly awake, but now your attention settles on the person you are becoming. Not a knight, not a monk, not a merchant with rings on soft fingers and a ledger full of promises. You're a gong farmer, though the name itself feels almost too tidy for the work. Gong is one old word for the contents of the privy pit, and farmer gives the trade a rustic dignity it does not always receive. You do not sow barley or prune vines. You harvest what the town has already digested. There is a certain honesty in that but sturdy. Your work begins because no household tavern in monastery or manor can escape the body's ordinary demands. People may dress in wool and linen, pray under painted saints, debate theology, swear loyalty, compose poetry, and accuse their neighbours of stealing hens, but every one of them must use the privy. The wealthy may have a more private place to go, the poor may share. Travellers may use the yard of an inn. Servants may carry chamber pots down narrow stairs before dawn. Yet sooner or later the pit below fills, and when it fills, the polite little fiction that waste has vanished becomes impossible to maintain. That is where you enter. You are not welcome like a craftsman bringing beauty into the world. The goldsmith makes cups that gleam in candlelight. The mason raises arches. The baker provides the smell of warm bread, which is basically medieval public relations at its finest. You bring a cart, a scoop, a rope, a bucket, and the news that somebody's household has been very productive. People need you, but they do not wish to be reminded of needing you. This is an old social trick. Necessary labour is often treated as shameful by those most dependent on it. A mainstream historical fact sits quietly under your feet in medieval England. Especially in larger towns like London, gong farmers were hired to empty cesspits and privies, and their work was often restricted to nighttime because of the smell and disruption. This was not merely a vague, dirty job floating in legend. Records from later medieval urban life show that such labour was regulated, paid, and sometimes carefully controlled. Town authorities cared because full pits could overflow, contaminate streets, anger neighbours, and create exactly the kind of civic embarrassment nobody wants near a market stall selling pies. You begin to understand your social position as the lane brightens. You are low in reputation but not useless. In fact, useless people are rarely so closely regulated. You are needed enough to be paid, watched, limited, summoned and cursed. That is a strange kind of importance. The town would rather not invite you to supper, but it will certainly send for you when the privy threatens to become a household guest. Your clothes are practical rather than proud. A coarse tunic, old hose, thick shoes if you are fortunate, and a cloak that has absorbed more history than any museum curator would willingly handle. You may wrap cloth around your mouth, not because it filters much by modern standards, but because it feels better to try. You may smear something strong beneath your nose, herbs or vinegar, just perhaps. A small rebellion against the air. Does it help a little? Enough to keep pretending? Certainly. Humanity has always been talented at small comforting rituals that do not solve the problem but make the problem feel negotiable. Your hands are rough, your nails are dark no matter how often you scrub them. Your shoulders know the weight of full buckets. Your back knows the bend and lift that repeats until the body becomes a tired rhythm. You learn to move slowly because haste spills things. You learn not to breathe deeply when the crust breaks. You learn not to trust old boards. You learn which households pay promptly and which pretend they never sent for you. There is always someone who believes the person doing the dirtiest work should also be easiest to cheat. Some traditions really do not deserve preservation, and yet your trade may earn more than someone expects. It is dangerous, disgusting, and socially tainted, so the payment can be better than the work status suggests. In some towns, removing waste is not only a duty but an opportunity. You might receive wages for the job, keep items found in the pit, or sell waste for fertilizer depending on local custom and demand. Imagine that. You stand at the bottom of society and still participate in a small economy of recovery. Coins lost through unfortunate timing. Broken knives, pins, pottery, the odd buckle. The town throws away secrets and you become one of the few people allowed to meet them. Here is a quirky tidbit to carry gently through the dark. Some cesspits have preserved objects so well that modern archaeologists have found shoes, wooden bowls, combs, seeds, nutshells, parasite eggs, and even delicate scraps that would never survive in ordinary soil. A privy pit can become a damp, sealed archive. It is a revolting treasure chest, yes, but still a treasure chest. History is not always written in gold leaf. Sometimes it waits in sludge with a cherry stone and a broken spoon. You do not think of yourself as an archaeologist, of course. You think of your supper, your rent, your aching feet, and whether the night's work will finish before the watchman starts asking sharp questions. Still, you know the city from below in a way others do not. You know which tavern drinks heavily because its pit fills faster. You know which wealthy house eats imported spices because their kitchen scraps whisper it. You know which neighbourhood floods in spring and which alley becomes a ribbon of filth after rain. Your knowledge is intimate, unwanted and accurate. People avoid your touch. Some may wrinkle their noses when you pass even after you have washed. Children may laugh until their mothers pull them back. A priest may remind everyone that humility is a virtue while standing conveniently upwind. Still, the town makes room for you because it must. You are like the hinge on a door no one notices until it breaks. Without you, daily life stiffens. Stinks and stops. Scholars continue to debate how far social stigma around gong farmers varied from town to town and whether some were seen mainly as degraded labourers, while others functioned more like specialised contractors. The evidence can be patchy, and medieval records often care more about payments, complaints and regulations than about how a worker felt when he came home at dawn. That silence matters. Many lives enter history only when they cause a problem for someone with a pen. So you stand inside that silence. You feel the shape of it around your shoulders. It is not only the smell that clings to you, it is the knowledge that respectability depends on forgetting you exist. The household above wants clean floors and usable privies. The town wants passable lanes. The market wants customers who are not distracted by overflowing pits. The church wants a congregation that can arrive without stepping through scandal. Everyone wants the benefit. Almost no one wants the worker. But in the small hours before shutters open and voices sharpen, you possess a kind of authority. You know the understructure of comfort. You know that civilization is not held together only by laws, prayers and kings. It is held together by people willing to lift what must be lifted, carry what must be carried and return again when the pit fills. The sky is paler now. A door opens. Someone gestures you toward the yard with the embarrassed urgency of a person whose household has delayed too long. You adjust your grip, lower your head and step toward the hidden place where the work begins. You step through the yard and the household closes behind you like a secret. The world narrows to damp boards, a leaning fence, a patch of beaten earth and the squat little structure at the back where the privy waits. It is not impressive from the outside. Few necessary things are. A small timber hut, a rough seat, a smell already announcing itself with the confidence of a town crier. The family may call it a necessary house, a privy, a jakes, or simply that place you do not discuss at dinner, unless dinner has gone terribly wrong. You lift the lantern and look carefully. Above ground, the arrangement is simple enough. A seat with a hole, sometimes a wooden bench, sometimes a little roof to keep rain off, sometimes a door that closes properly if fortune is smiling. Beneath it, though, is the real architecture. A pit cut into the earth, lined or unlined, depending on money, soil and local habit, in richer homes. The pit may be built with stone or brick, an attempt to hold back collapse and seepage. In poorer yards, it may simply be a hole that everyone hopes will behave itself. Hope, as you are learning, is not a sanitation plan. You crouch near the edge and notice how the privy is placed away from the main room, but not always far enough from wells, kitchens or neighbours. Space inside medieval towns is precious. Houses press tightly together, yards are cramped. A careful person might want the privy at a polite distance, but walls, property lines and stubborn geography do not always permit politeness. The town is a puzzle of bodies, smells and boundaries, and everyone is trying to fit the mess of life into plots of land too small for comfort. A mainstream historical fact rests here in the boards and soil medieval households used a range of toilet arrangements from simple cesspits and backyard privies to garderobes and castles and monasteries, where waste might drop through a chute into a pit-moat ditch or river below. In stone towers, a garderobe could be built into the thickness of the wall, a small chamber with the seat over an opening. It sounds almost elegant until you remember the destination. Medieval design could be clever, but clever does not always mean fragrant. You think of castles for a moment. The grand version in picture books has flags snapping in the wind, noble families in bright clothing and a minstrel somewhere plucking away as if rent is not due. But inside the walls, people still need relief. A garderobe might sit high above the ground with a chute leading down the outer wall. In some cases, the waste fell into a moat or collected where servants had to deal with it later. Imagine a castle siege where defenders worry about arrows boiling water food supplies, and also the increasingly confident pile under the latrine tower. History does like to keep its feet on the ground even when banners fly overhead. The word garderobe itself has a curious double life. It can refer to a latrine, but also to a wardrobe or storage place for clothes. One old explanation suggests that clothing stored near such chambers might have benefited from ammonia fumes, discouraging moths and fleas. That is the sort of quirky tidbit that sounds like someone making a joke after too much ale, and yet it appears in discussions of medieval domestic life. Whether people truly relied on latrine fumes for pest control in any systematic way is uncertain, but the idea lingers because it feels very medieval. Practical, smelly, and faintly rude. You return to the privy in front of you. It does not have the romance of a castle chute. It has splinters. The seat is smooth in places where many bodies have used it, rough in others where damp has lifted the grain. There may be straw nearby or scraps of cloth, moss leaves or old rags used for cleaning. Paper is not yet the cheap everyday solution you know. People use what is available, what is affordable, and what can be disposed of without too much trouble. If you are hoping for luxury, you have chosen the wrong century, the wrong yard, and possibly the wrong species. The pit below is a layered biography. Recent deposits lie on older ones. Ash may have been tossed in to reduce smell. Kitchen scraps may have joined the mixture. Broken pottery could rest inside along with bones from meals, nutshells, seeds, and little accidental losses. The pit is not only a toilet, it is also a convenient hole, and convenient holes attract many decisions that later generations may call archaeological evidence. You call it something less poetic. As a gong farmer, you must understand these structures not as curiosities, but as hazards. Is the pit deep? Has the edge softened? Are the boards rotten? Is there room to work from above, or must someone climb down? Has rainwater seeped in, making the contents heavier? Is the access blocked by a fence, a stack of firewood, a pigsty, or a household that refuses to move its precious barrels despite being the people who summoned you in the first place? You listen. A drip, a faint shifting, the quiet thickness of enclosed air. Historians still argue whether urban cesspits were mainly seen as private household responsibilities or as part of a wider civic system shaped by town ordinances, neighbour complaints and public health concerns. The truth likely changes from place to place. In some towns, officials intervene when waste causes trouble in streets or waterways. In some neighbourhoods, neighbours force action through complaints. In some houses, people wait until crisis arrives because crisis is apparently the universal human deadline. The hidden engineering of relief is not only technical, it is social. A privy tells you who has space, who has money, who has servants, and who shares discomfort with others. In a crowded tenement, many people may depend on one latrine. In a monastery, the latrine block can be planned with impressive order, sometimes placed near flowing water. In a wealthy urban household, the privy may be set apart, screened, and better maintained. In a poor yard, the pit may be shallow, near overflowing, and remembered only when the smell becomes a household member with opinions. You feel the class structure under your boots. The nobleman's waste and the labourer's waste are biologically similar, but socially they travel differently. One may pass through a stone chute in a private chamber. The other may fall into a communal pit beside the yard. Yet both eventually call for someone like you. The body is a great leveller, though society works very hard to disagree. You move your lantern closer to the opening. The light trembles along the rim, showing dark stains, damp earth, and small flies disturbed by warmth. The air rising from below is heavy and sour with a sweetness that turns the stomach if you let it. You do not let it. You breathe through your mouth, then regret that too. A sleepy listener safely tucked in the 21st century may pause here to appreciate plumbing. Please do. Plumbing deserves fan mail. But this world has its own logic. The pit keeps waste contained for a time. The boards provide privacy. The yard places the problem away from the hearth. The gong farmer empties it when needed. It is not modern, but it is not nothing. It is an arrangement built from wood, earth, habit, law, embarrassment, and necessity. The household waits indoors. No one wants to watch too closely. Above you, a grey strip of morning brightens between roofs, and the privies' shadow shortens across the yard. You set down your tools near the pit, testing the ground with your foot, judging whether work can be done without the edge giving way. The hidden chamber below has been receiving the household secrets for months, perhaps years. Now it must surrender them. You lean closer, lantern raised, and the darkness beneath the seat seems to answer with its own warm breath. The yard is quiet except for the soft hiss of your lantern and the distant shuffle of the waking town beyond the fence. You kneel beside your tools, checking each one by touch more than sight. A gong farmer who trusts luck does not remain a gong farmer for very long. Medieval cities have a sharp way of correcting carelessness. Your equipment is simple, but simplicity can still ruin your evening if it fails at the wrong moment. The bucket comes first, thick wood bound with iron hoops stained darker near the rim from years of use. You test the handle with a short pull, solid enough. A snapped handle during a lift means disaster for your boots, your dignity, and possibly the household's patience. Beside it rests long-handled scoop worn smooth where generations of hands have gripped it. The wood smells faintly of damp earth and sour vinegar from attempted cleaning. Nothing ever smells entirely clean in this profession. At best, odours merely negotiate a temporary truce. Your rope lies coiled nearby, heavy, slightly rough, reliable if kept dry, treacherous if neglected. Rope matters more than pride down here. A poor knot can turn a manageable task into a frantic scramble beside a collapsing pit. You carry hooks as well, useful for lifting boards, dragging debris, or steadying yourself when the footing shifts. Every tool has earned its place through unpleasant experience. And then there is the lantern. You lift it carefully, shielding the flame from the breeze creeping over the fence. Light is survival underground. A medieval cesspit is not just dark. It is the kind of dark that swallows edges and depth. The lantern throws weak golden circles against wood and mud, leaving shadows thick enough to feel solid. You begin to understand why nighttime labour acquires ghost stories. Every puddle looks suspicious. Every creak sounds personal. Records from medieval London mention regulations concerning the removal of waste, and workers were often expected to carry lanterns during night work. City officials worried about spills, obstruction, and public nuisance. The authorities may not have understood bacteria, but they certainly understood angry neighbours and lawsuits. Medieval governments could be surprisingly practical when enough people complained loudly enough. You set the lantern on a crate and continue your inspection. A broad-brimmed hat hangs from a peg nearby. Some gong farmers wear them to keep drips and splashes from hair and eyes. It is not elegant. Nothing about this trade encourages elegance. Still, practicality has its own weary dignity. Thick gloves would be wonderful, but good gloves are expensive, and many labourers simply use bare hands hardened by years of rough work. Skin cracks in winter. Nails split. Small cuts sting when sweat and filth creep into them. You glance at your boots, leather patched more than once. A decent pair is worth protecting because medieval streets destroy footwear with remarkable enthusiasm. Mudstones waste rainhorse traffic, and sheer daily mileage all conspire against the human foot. Archaeologists digging old cesspits have found discarded shoes in astonishing numbers, which feels oddly comforting. Even centuries ago, people were losing footwear to terrible conditions. A small handbell hangs from the cart outside the yard. Some workers use bells or shouted warnings when moving through tight lanes at night, especially with heavy loads. Nobody wants an unexpected collision in a dark alley involving a full bucket. Well, perhaps somebody does, but only if they deeply dislike their neighbour. You pause beside the cart itself. It creaks softly when touched, as though exhausted before the evening even begins. Wooden wheels, iron fittings, a flatbed ready for barrels and covered tubs. Horses may pull larger loads in wealthier operations, but smaller jobs often rely on human muscle. Your shoulders specifically. Medieval labour has an intimate relationship with back pain. There is another item tucked near the front wheel. A bundle of herbs, mint perhaps, lavender if someone is feeling optimistic, rosemary if fortune has smiled unusually brightly. People across medieval Europe often used herbs, flowers and fragrant oils to fight unpleasant smells, not because they were delicate, but because stench was believed to spread sickness through corrupted air. The theory of miasma, the idea that foul air carried disease, remained influential for centuries. In fairness, when something smells catastrophic, avoiding it feels like excellent medical advice. A curious little detail survives in some old accounts. Wealthy people sometimes carried pomanders, small scented containers filled with herbs, spices, or perfumes, especially during outbreaks of disease. Imagine strolling through town clutching a metal perfume ball while trying not to inhale medieval London. Honestly, it sounds less ridiculous the longer you think about it. You tie the herb bundle near your collar anyway. Pride has limits. The household owner finally appears at the back door holding a candle. He keeps his distance from you instinctively. Not cruelly perhaps, but carefully. His nightcap droops to one side and his face carries the strained politeness of a man who knows his problem is no longer avoidable. "You'll mind the paving stones," he mutters. Of course, the paving stones, not the pit threatening to revolt beneath his privy. The stones. You nod because arguing delays payment. He disappears again, quickly relieved to leave the matter in your hands. That relief follows you everywhere. People feel lighter the moment responsibility transfers onto somebody else's shoulders. In your case, quite literally. Some historians believe skilled gong farmers developed informal techniques for judging dangerous pits by smell, sound, and soil condition alone. Though written evidence is frustratingly thin, experienced workers likely relied on practical knowledge passed between labourers rather than carefully preserved manuals. Nobody commissions illuminated manuscripts titled Elegant Methods of Waste Extraction, a tragic loss for art history. You lift one of the boards covering the access opening. The smell rolls upward immediately, thick and damp. Warmth follows it. Not fire warmth, living warmth, rotting warmth, the kind that clings to your face. You lower the board again and wait. Patience matters. Sudden movement stirs gases trapped below. Some pits contain dangerous air that can overwhelm a worker before he fully understands what is happening. Even without scientific vocabulary, experienced labourers recognise certain warning signs. Bad air, heavy air, air that kills candles, air that makes a man dizzy. Medieval words may not speak of methane or hydrogen sulfide, but they absolutely understand that some pits are hungry. The lantern flame flickers when you lift the board a second time. You watch carefully. Still burning. Good enough for now. The town beyond the yard grows louder by degrees. A wagon rattles somewhere distant. Church bells begin their slow morning call. A woman laughs sharply in the next lane before coughing into silence. The ordinary world continues while you prepare for work that must remain mostly invisible. You gather the rope around one shoulder and test the scoop's weight. Every object in your hands carries memory from previous nights. Splintered wood, bent nails, damp handles. This is not glamorous equipment, but it forms the hidden machinery beneath urban life. Without these humble tools, the city clogs itself like a blocked artery. You crouch beside the pit once more. The lantern light trembles across the opening, turning the darkness below into something almost liquid. Your tools are ready. Your cart waits beyond the gate. The town above is busy pretending cleanliness happens naturally, and now finally it is time to begin earning the smell that will follow you home. You grip the edge of the opening and lower yourself carefully into the pit. The first sensation is heat. Not roaring heat like a forge, but a thick trapped warmth that presses against your face and settles into your clothes. The deeper you descend, the more the outside world disappears. Morning air fades, birdsong fades, even the bells seem farther away now, muffled by timber and earth. Your lantern swings gently beside you, throwing nervous shadows across damp walls streaked dark with years of use. You plant one boot cautiously against the side, testing the surface before shifting your weight. Medieval cesspits are not designed with worker comfort in mind. That may surprise absolutely no one. Some are lined with brick or stone, which helps stabilize the walls. Others are rough earth, slippery with moisture and softening from years of seepage. Your body learns quickly that balance matters more than bravery. One wrong step and history becomes intensely personal. The smell changes underground. Above the pit, it spreads through open air and mingles with smoke, mud, and city odours. Down here it becomes concentrated, dense, alive almost. Rotting food, human waste, damp wood, stagnant water, and sour fermentation combine into something that coats the back of your throat. Your eyes water immediately. You breathe shallowly through your mouth and discover this is somehow worse. Wonderful! You pause halfway down, allowing your senses to settle. Experienced workers know that panic wastes energy. The first plunge into the pit always shocks newcomers. Your body protests violently, insisting this environment is deeply unnatural. Unfortunately, the bucket still needs filling. A number of surviving medieval regulations suggest that cesspits could become dangerously full before owners arrange to empty them. Complaints appear in town records about overflowing privies, leaking waste and foul runoff entering neighbouring properties. Urban life in crowded towns required constant negotiation between convenience and catastrophe. Usually catastrophe waited patiently underground. The ladder creaks beneath you. That sound deserves respect. Wood does not last forever in damp conditions and replacement costs money. Some households maintain their pits responsibly. Others clearly believe maintenance is a spiritual concept rather than a practical one. You inspect each rung before trusting it fully. Splinters catch your palm. Moisture slicks the wood. Somewhere below, a faint bubbling sound rises through the dark. You do not investigate too closely. At last your boots touch the bottom, or something close enough to call bottom for emotional survival purposes. The surface beneath you shifts slightly. Thick sludge mixed with ash, scraps, mud, and compacted waste presses around your soles. You move slowly to avoid sinking deeper than necessary. The lantern light reveals walls glistening with moisture. Tiny insects scatter from the brightness. And there you stand in the hidden chamber beneath respectable medieval life. A strange thought creeps into your mind. Above you, breakfast may already be starting. Someone slices bread, someone stirs pottage. A child rubs sleepy eyes beside the hearth. Meanwhile, you're underground, knee-deep in consequences. The contrast feels almost poetic in a terrible way. You begin your work carefully. Scoop, lift, pour into bucket, repeat. The rhythm matters. Smooth movements conserve strength and reduce splashing. You angle the scoop beneath heavier material, lifting steadily instead of jerking upward. Your shoulders tighten with effort almost immediately. Wet waste weighs more than many people expect. Human civilization, it turns out, is astonishingly heavy once collected in one place. There are layers down here, softer material above, older compacted matter below. Bits of straw, animal bones, broken pottery. You catch the glint of something metallic in the lantern light and pause long enough to retrieve a small buckle. Tarnished, but possibly worth cleaning later. Tiny discoveries like this break the monotony of labour. A pit can swallow nearly anything dropped carelessly through the privy opening. Archaeologists examining medieval cesspits have discovered surprising evidence about daily diets. Seeds from figs, cherries, grapes and herbs appear alongside fish bones, eggshells and grain remains. In wealthier households, imported spices sometimes leave traces as well. A cesspit quietly records what people ate long after tablecloths and recipes vanish from history. The bucket fills slowly. You hook the rope through its handle and tug twice. Above, your partner begins hauling it upward. Teamwork matters in this trade. Working alone inside a pit is dangerous enough without adding exhaustion to the equation. A good partner listens for changes in your voice, notices delayed signals, and keeps the rope moving steadily. Trust underground becomes practical rather than sentimental. Another bucket descends. The walls seem to breathe around you as moisture trickles downward in thin, dark lines. The lantern flame flickers whenever air shifts through the opening overhead. You keep one eye on that flame constantly. Experienced labourers know that stillness underground can be deadly. If the flame weakens suddenly, caution follows fast behind it. Some modern researchers suspect that deaths inside cesspits and sewers were likely more common than surviving records clearly show. Dangerous gases can overwhelm a worker within moments, particularly in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation. Medieval people lacked chemical explanations, but many clearly understood that certain pits produced lethal air. Folk wisdom often arrives before scientific vocabulary does. You scrape another heavy load into the bucket. Your shoulders burn now. Your lower back aches with a dull, relentless pressure. Sweat gathers beneath your clothes despite the cool morning outside. The pit's warmth traps everything. Odour, moisture, exhaustion. Time itself feels slower down here. And yet your mind begins adapting. That may be the strangest part. Human beings can grow accustomed to almost anything given repetition and necessity. The smell still revolts you, but less sharply than before. Your movements become efficient. Your breathing steadies. The lantern light no longer feels frightening, merely dim. Even the sounds settle into familiarity. Dripping moisture, rope creaking overhead, soft shifting beneath your boots. You understand now why experienced gong farmers move with such calm detachment. If every moment inspired horror, no work would ever finish. So the mind narrows itself helpfully. Focus on the next bucket, the next lift, the next foothold. Civilization itself may rest on this humble psychological trick. A rat darts across the far edge of the pit and disappears into darkness. You pretend not to notice. Rats thrive wherever humans gather food and waste, and medieval towns provide excellent opportunities for ambitious rodents. Some are sleek and bold enough to stare directly at you before vanishing. It feels rude somehow, like being judged professionally by a rat. You continue working whilst dawn brightens above the opening. Thin grey light filters down around the ladder. Dust motes drift through it lazily. For a brief moment, the pit almost resembles a chapel window, if chapels smelled dramatically worse and contained fewer hymns. There is another small surprise buried in the sludge. A child's wooden toy wheel darkened by damp but still recognisable. You hold it up beside the lantern for a moment before tossing it into a separate sack. Perhaps it slipped from a pocket months ago. Perhaps a frustrated parent threw it away after a tantrum. Down here, objects lose their stories. You only glimpse fragments. The bucket rises again, heavy and drawn. Your muscles tremble slightly now from repetition. The work has only begun, but the pit already feels narrower, warmer, more oppressive. You wipe sweat from your brow with the back of your wrist and immediately regret the decision. A gong farmer learns many lessons the hard way. Above you, your partner calls down softly that another cart will soon arrive for hauling. The household wants the work finished before neighbours fully wake. Respectability depends heavily on timing. You glance upward toward the shrinking circle of morning sky. Fresh air waits there somewhere beyond the boards and fences. But first there is more lifting, more scraping, more careful footing in the dark beneath the city. You tighten your grip on the scoop and step deeper into the pit. Your arms ache before the sun has properly risen. The labour settles into your body with a slow, steady cruelty. Not dramatic pain, not the heroic suffering of ballads and battlefield stories, just the grinding exhaustion of repetitive work in foul conditions. Scoop, lift, pass the bucket upward. Listen for the scrape of wood overhead as your partner empties it into the cart. Wait for the rope to descend again. Repeat until your shoulders feel carved from damp stone. The pit clings to you now. The smell has soaked into your sleeves and settled into your hair. Sweat trickles down your neck beneath layers of grime and humid air. Your skin feels coated as though the darkness itself leaves residue behind. You discover very quickly that medieval gong farming is not merely unpleasant to smell, it is unpleasant to touch. Damp walls brush against your shoulders. Slippery boards shift underfoot. Tiny droplets gather on your face when disturbed matter splashes against the pit sides. And still, strangely enough, your body adapts. Not completely. Nobody becomes cheerful about standing in a cesspit before breakfast, but your senses dull their sharpest protests after a while. Human beings are stubborn creatures. We normalize almost anything if survival requires it. Sailors grow used to storms, millers grow used to dust, blacksmiths grow used to heat. You unfortunate soul grow used to the smell of a medieval privy, at least temporarily. You pause long enough to flex your fingers. The skin across your knuckles is cracked from cold weather and rough labour. Small cuts sting constantly in this environment. Infection is always a possibility. Medieval workers may not know about bacteria, but they absolutely recognise that wounds can turn ugly very quickly. Redness, fever, swelling, pain. These things need no microscope to become terrifying. Some surviving medical texts from the Middle Ages recommend washing with vinegar, herbal mixtures, or wine to clean wounds and fight corruption in the flesh. The effectiveness varies wildly, of course, but not every old remedy is nonsense. Vinegar does have mild antibacterial properties, though you're centuries away from hearing those exact words spoken aloud. You wipe your brow again this time, with a cleaner patch of cloth. Improvement. A low rumbling sound escapes your stomach, and for one deeply confusing moment you cannot tell whether you're hungry or merely offended by existence. Working through the night burns energy fast. Many labourers survive on coarse bread ale, onions, cheese, and whatever filling food they can afford cheaply. Ale is especially common because water quality in crowded towns is unpredictable. Weak ale often serves as an everyday drink for adults and children alike. Imagine explaining to a modern nutritionist that your breakfast beer is technically the safer option. The lantern flickers near your elbow while you scrape another load into the bucket. Something soft brushes your boot underwater. You freeze instinctively. Then you exhale slowly once your mind realizes it is probably cloth, not a living thing reaching up from medieval misery to claim companionship. Probably. The pit walls shimmer damply around you. Brick-lined sections hold firm where wealth once paid for sturdier construction. Other parts bulge unevenly with packed earth and roots creeping through cracks. You can often tell the age of repairs by texture alone. Fresh mortar looks pale and gritty. Older sections sag slightly under years of pressure. Workers like you develop sharp instincts for dangerous ground. Experienced labourers notice subtle changes in smell, sound, and movement long before disaster strikes. A soft crack overhead, a sudden sink beneath one foot, air turning heavy and stale. These are warnings worth respecting immediately. One curious belief from parts of medieval Europe claimed that strong foul odours could sometimes protect against disease by overpowering weaker harmful airs. The logic sounds backward today, but it grew from miasma theory and centuries of observation linking bad smells with sickness. People carried herbs, burned incense, scattered flowers on floors, and avoided stagnant air whenever possible. To them, scent and health were deeply connected. Standing where you are now, it is honestly difficult to blame them for reaching that conclusion. A faint sound drifts from above. Laughter. Someone in the household has woken fully. You picture servants preparing breakfast while trying not to think about the man below their privy. Perhaps they joke about you quietly, perhaps they pity you, perhaps they simply avoid looking toward the yard at all. You have noticed something important about this trade. People prefer waste when it remains abstract. Everyone understands that privies must empty somewhere, but nobody enjoys visual details. The moment the hidden process becomes visible, faces tighten. Eyes turn away. Respectable society depends heavily on selective attention. The rope drops another empty bucket beside you. You keep working. Your lower back throbs now with a steady, dull pressure. Every lift forces strain through your shoulders and spine. Medieval labourers rarely enjoy the luxury of ergonomic technique. Bodies wear down early. Bent back, swollen joints, damaged knees and chronic pain follow workers through middle age if they survive that long. Skeletons recovered from medieval cemeteries often show signs of hard, repetitive labour etched directly into bone. That fact lands differently when your own muscles are trembling underground. You shift your footing carefully and hear a soft sucking noise from below. The sludge grips your boots like wet clay. Slow movement is essential. Panic wastes strength. Fast motions lead to slips. Slips lead to stories nobody wants repeated. A rat appears again near the far wall, whiskers twitching in the lantern light. This one pauses longer than the last. Bold little creature. Medieval towns are paradise for scavengers. Rats thrive near granaries, kitchens, marketplaces and cesspits because humans generate endless opportunities. Historians still disagree on exactly how different rat populations contributed to plague transmission during later outbreaks, but nobody disputes that crowded towns and poor sanitation created ideal conditions for disease spread. The rat vanishes into a crack before you can decide which of you should feel more insulted by the encounter. You straighten briefly, stretching your back with a groan. The air feels thicker now. Humidity clings to your face. Your lantern flame narrows for a moment before strengthening again. You watch it carefully. Workers learn to respect flame behaviour underground. A weak flicker can mean trouble. You think suddenly about bathing. Not luxurious bathing with scented oils and polished marble tubs. Just clean water, fresh air, soap if fortune smiles kindly. Medieval people do wash despite popular modern jokes insisting otherwise. Public bathhouses exist in many towns during parts of the Middle Ages, though attitudes toward bathing shift over time due to morality concerns, cost disease, fears, and changing fashions. Ordinary washing happens with basins, cloths, rivers, and heated water whenever possible. Of course, after a night like this, you suspect even an entire river might hesitate before accepting you back. Another object surfaces from the sludge under your scoop, a small pewter spoon bent sideways but recognizable. You toss it into your separate find sack. Useful metal has value. Waste pits occasionally repay patients with tiny accidental treasures. Not glamorous treasures. Nobody composes songs about discovering a spoon in human sludge. Still, metal is metal. Your breathing slows into rhythm again. Lift. Pass. Wait. Lift again. The work becomes almost meditative in a terrible sleepy sort of way. Repetition narrows the world to dimple motions and dim lantern light. Outside the pit, morning expands across rooftops and market squares. Bakers prepare ovens, merchants unlatch shutters, apprentices hurry through muddy lanes. Life above continues cleanly separated from the hidden labour below. But you know the truth now. Every crowded town rests on invisible workers. Beneath the prayers, feasts, and commerce, someone must descend into the dark and carry civilization out bucket by bucket. By the time you climb out of the pit, the town has properly awakened. Not fully bustling yet, but stirring with intent. Smoke curls from chimneys in pale ribbons. Shop shutters creak open one by one. Somewhere nearby, a woman beats dust from a blanket with the determination of someone personally offended by dirt. You stand in the yard, breathing cool morning air, like a man returned from the underworld, which in a small practical sense you have been. Your partner hands you a cloth soaked in vinegar. You wipe your face, your neck, your forearms. It helps a little. Mostly it shifts the smell into a more sophisticated category of unpleasantness. The cart beside the gate is already half full now, covered loosely with rough canvas. The household owner has disappeared indoors, again eager to restore the illusion that respectable people never generate waste at all. Payment will come later after enough time has passed for him to feel emotionally distant from the entire process. You cannot blame him entirely. Medieval towns operate on layers of separation. Butchers kill animals outside public sight when possible. Tanners work near water and away from wealthier streets because their trade smells horrific. Dyers stain their hands blue and red, while respectable merchants sell finished cloth in tidy market squares. And you, carrying the hidden burden of everyone's digestion, belong firmly to the invisible economy. This is why your labour happens at night. In many towns, local authorities placed restrictions on when cesspits could be emptied or waste hauled through busy streets. Darkness solved several problems at once. Fewer pedestrians, less embarrassment, less chance of spilled filth interfering with daytime trade. Medieval officials may not have possessed modern sanitation science, but they absolutely understood public annoyance. And public annoyance, as history repeatedly proves, is one of civilization's most powerful forces. You guide the cart slowly through the lane. Wheels bump over uneven stones and muddy ruts. The horse pulling ahead flicks its ears irritably at flies already gathering in the warming air. Your lantern has been extinguished, now replaced by grey morning light that reveals every unpleasant detail more honestly than darkness ever did. People notice you immediately. Not openly, perhaps, most pretend not to stare. But faces tighten as you pass. A baker pauses while lifting trays. 2 apprentices step aside quickly near a doorway. A woman carrying water presses herself against the wall with exaggerated caution. You occupy a strange social space. Necessary, tolerated, but faintly contaminated in the public imagination. The smell reaches ahead of the cart like a warning banner. You pass beneath overhanging timber houses where chamber pots may still sit beside beds upstairs. Many urban households rely on chamber pots during the night, rather than walking through dark courtyards to outdoor privies. In theory, the contents should later be emptied properly into pits or drains. In practice, medieval records contain no shortage of complaints about people throwing waste directly into streets, alleys, or rivers. Some towns even required residents to shout warnings before tossing liquids from upper windows. Imagine strolling peacefully through a lane only to hear someone yell a medieval equivalent of "Look out below." Truly urban living has always demanded quick reflexes. You steer the cart around a puddle that looks suspiciously active. The streets themselves are crowded ecosystems. Mud mixes with straw horse manure, spilled ale ash from hearths, fish guts from market stalls, and runoff from workshops. During rainy weather, the entire town softens underfoot. In dry weather, dust rises thickly enough to coat throats and windowsills. Cleanliness exists in pockets rather than absolutes. Still people try. That part matters. Householders sweep doorways, officials fine offenders, monasteries establish drainage systems. Wealthier homes line cesspits with stone. Streets are repaired wells, inspected gutters cleared. Medieval towns are not passive heaps of filth where everyone simply gives up. They are busy, struggling environments where sanitation constantly competes against crowding weather poverty and human laziness, which, to be fair, remains a recognizable civic challenge. You turn toward a narrower lane where the smell of baking bread briefly overpowers the cart. For one glorious moment, the morning air contains warmth, yeast, smoke, and comfort instead of your usual cargo. Then the breeze shifts again. Tragedy returns. A pair of city watchmen stand near an intersection wrapped in heavy cloaks despite the growing daylight. One eyes your cart with practiced displeasure. He knows you, not personally perhaps, but professionally. Workers like you move through regulated spaces, certain roads, certain hours, certain dumping grounds beyond the walls. Medieval authorities often worried about illegal disposal because overflowing waste could block drains, pollute waterways, or spread unbearable odours through valuable districts. One surviving ordinance from London warned against dumping refuse into the Thames near populated areas. The river functioned as water source, highway, sewer, and economic lifeline all at once. Medieval people may not understand microbes, but they definitely understand when water starts tasting like regret. The watchman waves you onward. You continue slowly uphill. Your shoulders ache from hours underground. Even walking beside the cart feels exhausting now. Fatigue settles into the joints first, knees, spine, neck. a deep worker's tiredness rather than dramatic collapse. The sort of exhaustion that medieval labourers carry daily without expecting sympathy. You pass a church where bells ring out across the rooftops. Worshippers begin gathering near the entrance. Cloaks brush against stone steps. Murmured prayers drift through the morning air. Incense escapes briefly as the doors open, sweet and smoky. For one strange second, the scent mixes with the smell from your cart. Human civilization in a single breath. Sacred ritual and bodily necessity travelling the same street together. There are stories from later centuries claiming some executioners, grave diggers and waste workers formed tight communities because respectable society treated them as socially tainted. Whether gong farmers experienced that exact kind of isolation everywhere remains uncertain. Records rarely linger over friendships among labourers. Still, it is easy to imagine how shared hardship might create its own rough camaraderie. People who clean the hidden parts of life tend to understand one another quickly. Your partner scratches his beard and mutters something about rain coming later. You glance upward. Thick clouds drift low over the town roofs. Rain would turn the roads foul before noon. Another reason authorities prefer waste moved early. Once streets become crowded and muddy, transport grows slower and far more dangerous. A child suddenly points at your cart from a doorway. "What's under there?" he asks loudly. His mother pulls him back immediately. "Mind your manners." But the boy keeps staring with open fascination. Children have not yet mastered the adult art of pretending unpleasant things do not exist. To him, your cart is mysterious rather than shameful. You almost admire that. Almost. You continue towards the gate leading outside the town walls where dumping grounds and fields wait beyond crowded neighbourhoods. Behind you the city grows brighter and busier by the minute. Merchants shout, dogs bark, hammers ring against metal from a smithy. Ordinary life surges forward atop the invisible systems keeping it functional, and you move quietly through the middle of it all, carrying away what everyone else wishes forgotten before breakfast. The cart rolls through the gate and the town loosens around you, but the pit has not quite released its grip. Its smell clings to your clothes, its dampness to your skin, and its hidden contents to your thoughts. You have spent enough hours below privies to know that a cesspit is never only a cesspit. It is a cupboard without shelves, a diary without words, a confession chamber for the careless, the hurried and the unlucky. People throw away more than waste. They throw away food bones after supper, broken dishes after quarrels, cracked cups no longer worth mending, bent pins slipped from clothing scraps of leather rags too foul for washing, nutshells, fruit, stones, eggshells, fish bones and ash from the hearth. They drop things by accident too, a ring pulled loose while cleaning, a coin missed in the dark, a bead from a rosary, a buckle from a belt, a child's toy like the little wheel you found earlier sinking quietly into the household's least poetic archive. You begin to read pits the way another person reads a market stall. This one belongs to a family that eats plenty of fish. That one shows more cattle bone perhaps from a wealthier table or a nearby inn. Here are cherry stones, there are grape pips. Here are fragments of imported pottery that suggest someone had money, taste, or at least a guest who wanted to appear refined. The pit receives everything without judgment. That is one advantage over neighbours. Medieval archaeologists often value cesspits because damp oxygen, poor conditions can preserve organic materials that vanish elsewhere. Seeds, plant fibres, leather, wood, and even parasite eggs may survive long enough to tell modern researchers about diet, trade, hygiene, and disease. A beautiful manuscript might preserve the thoughts of a monk. A cesspit preserves what the monk had for dinner. Both are useful, though one is considerably less welcome on a coffee table. You remember the household above the pit, all closed shutters and embarrassed voices. Down below, embarrassment had become evidence. Not moral evidence, not scandal, just the intimate leftovers of being alive. A shard of pottery, for example, can carry a whole quiet world. You find them often their edges dulled by damp. Some are coarse local wares from everyday cooking pots. Others are glazed pieces, brighter, smoother perhaps from jugs used to pour ale or wine. Ceramic fragments travel through trade routes, workshops, and households before ending in darkness. A potter shaped the clay. A merchant carried it. A cook used it. Someone broke it. Someone decided the privy pit was as good a place as any for disposal. And then your scoop discovered it among the layers of household time. Not glamorous, but honest. You also find bones, chicken bones snapped small, fish bones delicate as needles, pig bones from richer meals, sheep or goat remains. Sometimes butchery marks show where knives cut through joints. Tiny details reveal whether people boiled, roasted, chopped, or gnawed their food. The medieval table was not one thing. A noble feast with spiced sauces and white bread differs sharply from a labourer's coarse bread ale. Beans, onions, and pottage, yet both leave traces below. Food scraps also whisper about seasons. Cherry stones suggest summer fruit. Nutshells hint at autumn. Fish remains may point to fasting days, since Christian rules often restricted meat consumption on certain days and during Lent. People might complain about rules as people do, but their plates often reflect them. A pit can become a calendar in layers. One unusual detail worth keeping in the dark with some medieval cesspits have revealed seeds from imported figs and grapes, showing that even perishable pleasures could travel far when trade networks allowed it. Imagine, after a long damp winter, a sweet fig eaten in a northern town, its tiny seeds passing into the underworld and waiting centuries for someone in gloves to notice. History has a strange sense of humour. It saves the seed and loses the name. You jolt as the cartwheel hits a stone. The covered tubs shift. Your partner curses softly, then pats the load as if calming a difficult animal. You continue along the road beyond the walls, but your mind remains in the layers beneath the privy seat. Not everything in the pit arrives by accident or convenience. Some objects are deliberately discarded because they are contaminated, broken, unlucky, or simply beyond repair. Medieval people mend far more than modern consumers do. Cloth is patched, shoes are resoled, pots are sometimes riveted, tools are sharpened until nearly gone. Throwing something away often means it has truly reached the end of patience. This makes the pit's contents especially revealing. Waste is not random, it is chosen under pressure. What can be reused stays above. What cannot descends. Sometimes you find items that raise questions nobody can answer cleanly. A gaming piece, a pilgrim badge, a comb with broken teeth, a little knife, a charm, a fragment of writing used for wrapping or discarded after losing value. Were these lost, hidden? Thrown away in anger, dropped by a servant, carried by a traveller? The pit never explains itself. It only preserves the result. Researchers continue to differ over how much certainty can be drawn from cesspit finds. One scholar may see evidence of diet and household status. Another may warn that rubbish can move between places, that pits are cleaned, reused, mixed, or filled deliberately with soil and debris. A cesspit is a rich source, but not a simple one. Like all human evidence, it mutters, contradicts itself, and occasionally smells far too confident. You pass a small ditch where weeds grow thick beside the road. The cart groans. Dawn light has strengthened into morning-touching fields beyond the town with a soft, pale glow. For a moment the world seems peaceful, almost clean. Birds flit between hedges, moist grass bends under dew. The city behind you hides its refuse behind walls and routine, yet you know what lies beneath those yards. You have seen the combs, the bones, the seeds, the pottery, the lost coins, and the little toy wheel. You have stood where private lives settle into layers. You know the poor by their patched scraps and coarse wares, the better off by their imported fragments, the hurried by their losses, the careless by their spills, the children by their small broken things. It gives you a strange intimacy with strangers. You do not know their names, but you know what they ate after the market. You know whether they drank from glazed jugs or rough cups. You know if their household wasted meat or stretched every bone for broth. You know if they had servants to carry chamber pots, or if the same family that slept upstairs cleaned its own mess when no one else would. The cart rattles onward and the town bells fade behind you. Under the canvas, the night's burden waits to be hauled farther from polite streets. But in your memory, the pit remains open, not just as a hole of stench and labour, but as a dark little museum of ordinary life where everything people deny, drop, break, eat, lose, and forget gathers quietly below. You look back towards the town wall and think of the household above the pit now returning to its ordinary morning. The yard is being closed, the boards are set back, the privy seat is usable again, and already the family will begin forgetting the dark work beneath it. That forgetting is part of comfort. A clean threshold, a swept hearth, a quiet breakfast, a child sent to fetch water, a servant carrying embers to restart the fire. Life smooths itself over quickly, but you have been underneath it. You have stood below the bench where bodies paused in the dark. You have heard the muffled scrape of feet above your head. You have felt the vibrations of a door opening, closing, opening again. A household is never just walls and furniture. It is a rhythm of habits. When people rise where they wash, how they cook, who eats first, who cleans last, who has privacy and who must wait. In a merchant's house, the privy may sit in a rear yard shared by family servants, apprentices and visitors. The merchant himself might speak grandly of trade in wool, wine, salt or cloth, but his household depends on servants carrying chamber pots, clearing scraps, fetching water, and managing the little chores that keep dignity intact. The privy is a quiet measure of rank. Some people use it, some people clean around it, some people summon you when it overflows. Inside, the first meal of the day is probably simple. Bread ale, perhaps. Cheese onions, leftovers, or pottage warmed from the night before. The wealthy may enjoy better bread, more meat imported flavourings, and cleaner vessels. The poor eat what stretches. Everyone listens for the price of grain because grain decides whether winter is merely hard or frightening. Medieval households were often larger and more mixed than the neat modern family unit many people imagine. Apprentices might live with masters, servants slept in kitchens, lofts, or shared spaces. Lodgers came and went. Widowed relatives hired labourers' children, and guests could all crowd under one roof. Privacy was limited, and the privy made that obvious. Even bodily routines followed household hierarchy. You picture a young servant girl, hair tucked beneath a linen cap, carrying a chamber pot down the stairs before dawn. She moves carefully because spills mean scolding. She has done this so often that her hands know the weight without thought. She may be 12, 15, perhaps older, but work has already bent time around her. Her day begins before her master's and ends after his. Nobody writes poems about her unless she is unusually beautiful or conveniently tragic. Yet she keeps the household functioning. You also picture the children. They know the yard, the smells, the forbidden corners. They dare each other to peer into the privy. They drop toys, pebbles, cherry stones, little bits of mischief through the opening. Perhaps that wooden wheel you found came from one of them. A toy slipping from a small hand, a gasp, a scolding adult, and then the object vanishes into the household underworld. Centuries later, someone may hold it and wonder about the child who lost it. There is a tender strangeness in that. One lesser-known detail from urban domestic life is that some households use pots or basins at night not only for convenience, but because going outside after dark could be genuinely unsafe. Streets were unlit, uneven, and sometimes dangerous. A sleepy trip to a yard privy could mean mud thieves, animals, loose boards, and neighbours hearing more than anyone wished. Modern bathrooms may be ordinary to you, but they are also miracles of privacy. You pass a roadside hedge while the cart creaks beneath its covered load. The breeze has turned cooler. Your partner walks ahead guiding the horse, and you let your thoughts drift back into those rooms above the pit. A noble household offers a different picture, but not a cleaner truth. In a castle or manor, servants manage the bodily needs of their superiors with practiced discretion. Chamber pots may be emptied by the lower-ranking workers. Garderobes may be cleaned by people whose names vanish from records. Fine clothing, jewelled belts, and carved furniture do not remove the basic problem. They only assign it downward. Rank shapes even embarrassment. A lord may never see the full consequence of his own comfort. A lady's attendants may carry away what must not be discussed. A guest may use a private chamber and never think about the chute or pit below. But you moving through yards and under chambers know that refinement is often a curtain hung over labour. The point is not that medieval people are hypocrites. It is that households are systems and systems hide their least graceful parts. Your own world does it too. Waste leaves through pipes. Trash vanishes in trucks. Food arrives trimmed, wrapped and washed. Someone somewhere handles the unpleasant stages. The medieval town simply keeps the process closer to the nose. Questions remain among researchers about how sharply household sanitation differed by class, region and building type. Archaeological evidence can show pits, drains and deposits, while written records reveal rules and complaints, but the daily experience of ordinary users is harder to reconstruct. Did a shared tenement privy feel normal, shameful, annoying, dangerous, or merely boring? The answer likely depended on weather crowding, age, gender, wealth, and whether the seat had splinters. Always the splinters. You imagine the merchant's wife now directing the household with a practiced voice. She may supervise servants, accounts, food storage, cloth, children, and hospitality. Her work is constant even if later records credit men more visibly. She knows when the privy smells worse than usual. She knows which servant forgot to cover the chamber pot. She knows that guests notice such things. Domestic authority often lives in details too small for grand chronicles. A household's reputation can be damaged by smell. That may sound funny, but it is serious. A prosperous home should appear orderly. Bad odours suggest neglect, poverty, illness, or moral disorder. People connect cleanliness with status, even before modern germ theory. To keep a house respectable, someone must sweep, scrub air bedding, clear ashes, dump wash water, manage animals, and eventually call you. And so you are part of their reputation, though they would prefer not to admit it. Your cart reaches a bend in the road and the town behind you shows its roofs above the wall like uneven teeth. Smoke rises from many hearths now. Each line of smoke marks a room where people are boiling, baking, warming, waking. In each room, bodies create chores, laundry, dishes, bedding, waste. The grand story of urban life depends on endless small acts performed by tired hands. You think again of the view from below, the privy seat overhead, the faint boards, the muffled thump of a step. When you're in the pit, the household becomes sound and shadow. You do not see faces, only traces. A dropped spoon, a child's toy, fish bones from a fast day, ash from the hearth, scraps of cloth. The hidden biography of people who may never look you in the eye. The horse snorts and the cart rolls onward. Behind you the family will eat, argue, pray, bargain, laugh, sleep and use the privy again. Above the pit, life resumes its decent shape. Below it, the next layer begins. The road beyond the town walls dips toward lower ground, and the wheels of the cart begin sinking into softer earth. Clouds gather overhead in heavy grey folds, trapping the morning dampness close to the fields. Your shoulders are stiff from lifting, your hands smell permanently sour despite vinegar washing, and the muscles in your back pulse with dull fatigue. And still danger has not finished with you. Most people imagine your trade as merely disgusting. That is because most people are sensibly unwilling to climb inside a cesspit long enough to discover the rest of the problem. Smell is only the first enemy. After that come the hidden hazards. Weak boards, collapsing walls, poisonous air, infection, slipping in darkness, falling into pits deeper than expected. Even the simple act of hauling a heavy load across muddy roads can end badly if a wheel breaks or a horse panics. Your work sits in that uncomfortable category of labour where death can arrive through ordinary routine. You remember one pit from years earlier. Narrow yard, wealthy owner, nicely built privy above, or so it appeared. But beneath the surface, rainwater had softened the lower earth. You stepped near the edge while lifting a bucket, and felt the ground give way under one boot. The walls slumped inward with a wet cracking sound that still visits your dream sometimes, not a dramatic collapse. Worse than dramatic, slow enough for terror. You caught yourself on the ladder before sliding farther. Another worker might not have. There are scattered reports across medieval and later records of labourers suffocating in pits, wells, or enclosed spaces. People understood the danger even without chemical explanations. Workers spoke of foul vapours, bad air, invisible corruption that stole breath and consciousness. Some tested enclosed spaces with candles or lanterns, watching flames for warning signs. If the fire weakened, strangely, caution followed. Your lantern from earlier was not just for light, it was also a quiet little negotiation with death. The horse snorts uneasily as the cart jolts over roots near the roadside. You steady one of the barrels with your hand. Even now outside the pit, the load remains dangerous. Waste can leak, wheels can slide, covers can shift loose. One accident near a crowded road could bring fines, fury, and an unforgettable smell spreading through the market district. Town officials took these risks seriously enough to issue rules about disposal and transport. In some places, dumping waste illegally into streams or public areas could lead to penalties. Medieval governments often lacked modern bureaucracy, but they were surprisingly energetic when filth interfered with trade or public order. Commerce dislikes foul surprises. You rub your aching wrist and glance toward the fields ahead. The open air feels cleaner than the town, though not entirely pleasant. Marshy ground nearby releases its own earthy smell, thick with wet grass and standing water. Crows stalk through furrows looking for scraps. A farmhouse chimney sends pale smoke into the cloudy sky. You know workers who have developed strange habits around fear. One mutters prayers before entering every pit. Another refuses to work during thunderstorms because he believes lightning stirs dangerous vapours underground. One old labourer used to chew cloves constantly because he claimed the spice protected his lungs. Whether it truly helped or not, nobody could say, but he survived into old age, which in your profession already counts as impressive evidence. There are also stories whispered among workers about pits that seemed cursed. Places where men fainted suddenly. Places where animals refused to approach. Places where lantern flames died too quickly. Medieval labourers lived close to superstition because superstition grows naturally wherever danger hides invisibly. When people lack scientific language, imagination fills the dark spaces. And honestly, standing waist-deep in a warm pit before dawn, imagination does not need much encouragement. You think again about infection. Tiny cuts on your hands, cracked skin around your knuckles, the endless contact with damp filth. Fever is common enough in medieval life already. Add poor nutrition, cold winters, exhausting labour, and untreated wounds, and the body fights an uphill battle constantly. Some skeletons recovered from medieval cemeteries show signs of arthritis, healed fractures, worn joints, and physical strain that began early in life. Labour carved itself into the body year after year. A gong farmer's injuries may never appear in heroic songs, but the damage accumulates quietly. Bent spine, ruined knees, chronic coughing from foul air and damp conditions. Hands stiffened by cold mornings and heavy lifting. The danger follows you home too. Neighbours may avoid sitting too close at the alehouse. Children wrinkle their noses when you pass. Prospective spouses sometimes hesitate around men whose trade clings to them physically and socially. Even after washing, the smell seems to linger in imagination if not reality. Reputation behaves strangely around invisible work. Society depends on you while pretending you're slightly contaminated by necessity itself. A curious note appears in some old urban records. Complaints occasionally surfaced about privies built too close to neighbouring property lines or wells. Imagine arguing with your neighbour not over music or fences, but over the exact direction of medieval toilet seepage. Human civilization truly rests upon endless tiny negotiations. Rain begins at last, not heavy yet, just thin cold drops darkening the road dust. You pull your cloak tighter and help guide the cart toward firmer ground. Rain complicates everything. Roads become slick, pits become unstable, drainage overflows. Streets inside town grow muddier and more dangerous for hauling. You know workers who drowned in flooded pits after sudden storms. That thought arrives uninvited and stays a while. The rhythm of the cartwheels slows through the mud. Your horse lowers its head stubbornly against the drizzle. Somewhere far behind you, bells drift faintly from the town tower. Morning continues for everyone else. Bakers bake, merchants haggle, priests pray, apprentices sweep workshops. Most of them will never think about the risks carried by the men hauling waste beyond the walls. That invisibility becomes its own kind of danger. When work remains unseen, suffering becomes easy to ignore. There is disagreement among modern historians about exactly how organised waste management systems truly were across different medieval towns. Some places show impressive planning through drains regulations and scheduled removal. Others appear far more chaotic, relying heavily on local custom and individual effort. Conditions likely changed block by block, year by year, depending on weather, wealth politics, and population growth. The Middle Ages were not one single experience. A prosperous trading city differed from a muddy market town. A monastery differed from a crowded riverside district. But wherever people gathered densely, the same truth emerged eventually. Somebody had to go below. Rain taps softly against the canvas covering your loads now. The smell grows stronger in damp weather, somehow richer and heavier. You wrinkle your nose and keep walking beside the cart boots sinking into wet earth. Ahead, beyond a line of bare trees, lies the dumping ground where tonight's labour will finally leave your hands. But even there, danger waits in different forms. Slippery slopes, exhausted animals, rotting heaps attracting vermin and insects. Your work never truly becomes safe, it only changes shape. You glance once more toward the distant town wall fading through rain and mist. From this distance, the city looks peaceful. Church towers reeling above rooftops, smoke drifting upward, morning life unfolding normally, no sign at all of the darkness beneath it. The dumping ground waits ahead, but before you reach it, your mind drifts toward the other unpleasant weight carried through this trade payment. Money matters more than pride when your boots are soaked. Your back is sore and your cloak smells as if it has personally offended heaven. The household that hired you will want the work done quietly, quickly, and preferably at a price that makes their own delay seem reasonable. You naturally have different hopes. You want coins enough for food rentail repairs to your boots, and perhaps a little left over for the kind of evening when nobody asks what you did for a living before sitting beside you. A gong farmer's wage can be surprisingly respectable in some places, not because society admires the work, but because almost nobody wants to do it. Disgust has economic value. Danger has economic value. Night labour has economic value. When a job can make people gag from the far side of a courtyard, the worker gains a small bargaining position, though let us not get carried away and call it power. Medieval society is not suddenly generous because you smell terrible. You think of last night's household owner with his worried face and careful distance. He will pay because he must. A full cesspit is not a philosophical inconvenience. It is a practical emergency under the privy seat. If ignored, it can overflow, leak poison the yard anger neighbours, or make guests reconsider every invitation. People may look down on you, but when the pit rises, they look for you. In late medieval London and other crowded towns, workers who emptied privies could receive payment by the job, and records sometimes show organised arrangements for removing waste from specific properties. The exact amounts varied by time, place, access, depth, and urgency. A shallow pit in a simple yard costs one thing. A deep neglected pit under awkward boards in a wealthy house costs another. If the owner has waited until disaster is tapping politely from below, the price tends to climb. Urgency is a wonderful tutor. The rain continues lightly, turning your hair damp beneath your cap. You walk beside the cart, imagining the coins owed to you. Perhaps the household pays in pennies. Perhaps part of the arrangement includes food or drink. Perhaps there are disputes because the owner insists the pit was not so full after all, despite having summoned you in a panic before dawn. Customers in every century possess a mysterious ability to forget the size of the problem once someone else has solved it. You have learned to negotiate before the work when possible. Agree on the pit. Agree on the cartloads. Agree on whether broken boards are included. Agree on who pays if access must be widened or if a barrel splits. Agree most importantly before the smell is gone and gratitude evaporates. Still, money does not come only from wages. Sometimes you keep what the pit gives up. A coin drop through a privy hole is no longer wanted by its original owner, at least not wanted enough to retrieve personally. A buckle, spoon, ring, knife, or scrap of metal can be cleaned and sold. Rags can be sorted, if not too spoiled. Bones and ash may have uses. Even the waste itself may carry value when moved to fields or gardens. In a world where resources are reused until they surrender completely, very little is automatically worthless. This is the strange arithmetic of your life. What others reject becomes part of your living. There are accounts from different periods and places of night soil being sold or transported for fertilizer, though practices varied widely. Human waste has nitrogen and other nutrients plants can use, but it also carries risks when handled poorly. Medieval farmers and gardeners understood the fertility of dung in broad practical terms. They knew the earth could be fed. They also knew, through experience if not modern science, that some materials needed aging, mixing, or careful placement before they were useful rather than ruinous. A small oddity lingers around the phrase gong farmer itself. To modern ears it sounds almost quaint, perhaps like someone harvesting musical instruments in a foggy meadow. The reality is less lyrical. The word gong referred to privy filth, and the worker farmed it in the sense of removing or managing it. Language sometimes softens what life makes harsh. Then again, perhaps a softer word helped everyone survive breakfast conversations. You and your partner reach a flatter stretch of road where the horse pulls more easily. He mentions that the last household still owes him from 2 weeks ago. You both fall into the familiar silence of workers thinking uncharitable thoughts about people with cleaner sleeves. Debt is common. Payment is often delayed. Medieval economies run heavily on credit, reputation, seasonal income, and personal obligation. A merchant may promise to pay after market day. A landlord may deduct repairs. A widow may offer less because she has little. A tavern keeper may pay in ale and old bread, which is not ideal but not nothing. Coin is precious, and labourers often live close to shortage. You do not always get to choose between fair payment and necessary work, and status complicates everything. A craft guild member may bargain differently from an unskilled labourer. A wealthy household can delay with confidence. A poor tenant may plead honestly. A town official can make trouble if disposal rules are not followed. You stand at an intersection of need and contempt, useful enough to hire, low enough to cheat, skilled enough to resent it. Modern readers sometimes ask whether gong farmers were well paid. The honest answer is cautious. Some evidence suggests the work could pay better than many ordinary labouring tasks because it was dangerous and repellent. But good pay for a horrible job does not mean comfort, security, or respect. A handful of extra coins cannot fully purchase health, social standing, or clean lungs. Income and dignity do not always arrive together. You tap your pouch, feeling the few small coins already earned from earlier work. Their weight is reassuring. Coins smell less moral than sermons, but they buy bread more reliably. The cart approaches the edge of the disposal area, where the ground turns darker and more churned. Other loads have been brought here before. You can see old heaps mixed with straw ash earth and stable dung. Flies gather even in the damp air. Crows hop nearby, deeply interested in the civic process. A man waiting by the field raises a hand. He may be a farmer's servant, a hired carter, or someone responsible for managing where the load goes. Payment may involve not just removing waste from the household, but delivering it somewhere useful or acceptable. No one wants it in the street. Someone may want it after treatment in the soil. Between those two truths lies your livelihood. There is still debate among historians about how profitable waste removal truly was for the workers themselves rather than for contractors, landlords, or urban authorities who controlled access and disposal rights. The surviving records usually care about fees, fines, and responsibilities more than household budgets of labourers. What feels like a decent wage on parchment may shrink quickly once tools, partners, animals, bribes, repairs, illness, and unpaid debts enter the picture. You know that without needing parchment. The rain softens again to mist. You help guide the horse toward the place where the barrels can be unloaded. Your hands close around the cartrail rough wood, pressing into cracked skin. Payment will come later, perhaps after argument, perhaps after delay. For now the wage is still half imaginary, suspended somewhere between disgust already endured and coins not yet received. You breathe through your mouth and prepare to empty the load. The town has paid you to remove what it cannot bear to keep. Whether it will pay you fairly is another matter entirely. You bring the cart to a halt beyond the town walls where the road gives way to churned earth and then smell changes again. Inside the town, odour is crowded, layered, pressed between walls and roofs. Out here it spreads wider, loosened by fields, hedges, wet grass and open sky. It is still bad naturally. Let us not become poets beyond reason, but the air has room to carry the stink away in long uneven breaths. The disposal ground lies in a hollow beyond the gate, far enough from respectable doorways to feel separate yet near enough for carts to reach without wasting the whole day. Nothing about it is beautiful. Old heaps rise in dark mounds mixed with straw ash, stable dung, rotted food scraps and household refuse. Rainwater gathers in shallow pools with oily surfaces. Flies drift in lazy clouds despite the damp. Crows pick across the edges, stepping with the solemn importance of tiny officials inspecting municipal failure. You and your partner begin unloading. The first barrel comes down awkwardly from the cart bed. Your hands grip wet wood. Your boots slide. The horse shifts, eager to be done with this place, and honestly, who can blame him? You tilt the barrel toward the assigned heap and the contents slide out in a heavy, slow mass, thickened with ash and straw. It lands with a sound that should probably be illegal after breakfast. Beyond the hollow fields stretch in strips and patches. Some belong to townspeople, some to nearby villages, some to landlords whose names carry farther than their labour. Medieval waste does not simply vanish once carried outside the walls. It enters another system. Ditches, middens, gardens, orchards, fields, rivers, marshes, and unofficial dumping places, all by sewage or receive what the town expelled so keep sewage. Many medieval towns tried to control where waste went, especially when dumping threatened waterways, roads, or neighbouring property. Rivers were useful for transport and washing, but they also became convenient targets for refuse. Ditches outside walls could become open repositories. Fields could absorb the manure if handled with care. The problem was never merely removing filth from one place. It was deciding whose landscape had to receive it next. That question has a long future, by the way. Every society has versions of it. Where does the unwanted thing go? Who lives beside it? Who profits from moving it? Who pretends distance is the same as disappearance? You scrape the barrel with a wooden paddle and step back. A farmer's servant approaches with a forked tool, spreading older material across a patch where it will age and mix with straw. He keeps his face turned away, but not with the sharp disgust of townspeople. Rural workers have their own relationship with dung. Horse dung, cow dung, pig manure, chicken droppings, rotted bedding, composted plant matter. The countryside understands that soil must be fed, though it may draw careful lines between animal manure and human waste. Those lines shift by region, crop, custom and necessity. Human waste is powerful fertilizer, but dangerous when used carelessly. It can carry disease, parasites and contamination. Medieval people did not describe those risks in modern terms, yet experience taught caution. Fresh waste could burn plants, offend neighbours, and sicken people if it entered wells or food supplies. Mixed with straw ash and thyme, it became more manageable. Time is one of the oldest technologies. A small surprise waits near the edge of the heap-broken oyster shells. You recognise them from town pits and refuse dumps. Oysters were once widely eaten in many coastal and river-connected regions, not always the luxury food modern diners imagine. Shells could be discarded in huge quantities, crushed for lime, used in building materials, or simply added to the archaeological clutter of appetite. It's oddly funny to imagine medieval people slurping oysters, tossing shells aside, and leaving future researchers to debate dinner habits while standing in mud. You help unload the second barrel. The road behind you carries other traffic now. A cart of hay, a woman with baskets, a boy driving geese with a stick and far too much confidence. They all keep distance from your work. Not dramatic distance, just enough to mark separation. The town needs the dumping ground, but nobody visits for leisure. There are no strolling couples admiring the view. No one says, "What a charming mound of municipal output, let us picnic nearby. Civilization has limits." Still, the place is busy in its own way. Men bring stable muck from inns. Household rubbish arrives in baskets. Sweepings from workshops collect here. Ash from hearths, spoiled straw, dead animals, sometimes broken goods, spoiled food, and whatever else the town has decided should move beyond its walls. A medieval dumping ground is not neat. It is a ragged border between urban appetite and rural absorption. The servant spreading the heat points toward a drier patch. "Not there," he says, "too near the ditch." You nod and shift the next barrel. That little correction matters. Waste near a ditch can wash away with rain, carrying filth towards streams, ponds or fields where it is not wanted. Water is a blessing until it becomes a messenger. Towns and villages often argued about drainage, runoff, mill streams and polluted water. The medieval landscape was stitched together by rights and complaints. Who could use a stream? Who could block a ditch? Who had fouled the water? Who had to clean it? The answers were rarely simple and often loudly disputed. Researchers still weigh how much medieval people distinguished between types of waste in practice. Written rules sometimes separate dung rubbish, offal, and human filth, but daily behaviour could be messier. A town ordinance might sound orderly. A muddy lane after market day might tell a less elegant story. As with so much in history, the rule and the reality stare at each other across a puddle. You think of the town behind you, its wall cutting a line between inside and outside. Walls protect against enemies, mark privilege, control trade, and declare identity. But waste crosses them constantly. Every cartload proves that a city's boundary is porous. Food comes in from fields and farms, fuel comes in from woods and peat beds, animals come in, goods come in, people come in. Then refuse goes out. The city breathes through gates. If the gates close too tightly, it chokes. The third barrel is lighter, mixed with more ash than sludge. That makes it easier to handle, though the powder rises in damp grey puffs and clings to your sleeve. Ash is useful in pits because it dries mask smell and adds bulk. Households throw hearth ash into privies yards and middens, creating layers that soften the worst of the wetness. The ash carries the memory of winter fires cooking. Warmth and smoke, even comfort, becomes refuse eventually. The horse stamps at flies. Your partner pats its neck and murmurs nonsense to calm it. Animals endure human systems without being consulted. Horses pull waste carts, pigs root through rubbish, dogs nose around alleys, chickens peck at scraps, rats prosper in shadows. Medieval sanitation is not just human, it is shared unwillingly with every creature that eats from our leftovers. A crow hops close to a newly emptied patch and cocks its head at you. You stare back. For a moment, you and the bird seem to agree that the world is ridiculous. Then it pecks at something and flaps away. At last, the cart bed is empty enough to scrape down. You rinse what you can with water from a nearby ditch, though rinse is an optimistic word here. The wood remains stained. The smell remains. Your hands remain your hands, tired and rough. Yet the load has moved from household to pit, from pit to cart, from cart to disposal ground. The journey is complete for now. Behind you, the town continues to wake into trade prayer, hunger argument, and ordinary errands. Ahead of you, the fields wait under mist and soft rain. Waste beyond the walls is no ending. It is a transfer, a quiet rearranging of burden from one part of life to another. You climb back beside the cart lighter now, but not clean, and turn toward the road where the next job is already waiting somewhere inside the gates. The road back towards town cuts beside damp fields where rows of winter crops sit low beneath the grey sky. Rain clings to the soil in shining patches, and the earth smells rich in a way the town never does. Cleaner, perhaps, is not the right word. More honest, maybe. Out here, nothing pretends that decay is separate from life. You slow beside a field where two labourers spread old manure with broad wooden forks. Their boots disappear ankle-deep in mud. One of them lifts a hand toward you without enthusiasm. Farmers and gong farmers share a practical understanding of unpleasant materials. The difference is mostly one of distance and timing. To townspeople, your cart carries filth. To struggling soil, it can carry survival. Medieval farming depends heavily on maintaining fertility. Fields are used again and again, often with limited land available for expansion. Animals graze, crops drain nutrients from the ground. Without ways to restore the soil, yields weaken. Hunger follows poor harvests quickly, and hunger in the Middle Ages is not a poetic inconvenience, it is thin children rising prices. Hollow faces at market stalls and anxious prayers for weather to change, so people gather manure carefully. Animal dung is especially valued. Horse manure from stall, cow dung from byres, sheep droppings from grazing land. Mixed with straw and kitchen scraps, these materials rot into something fields can absorb. Human waste enters this system unevenly depending on region, custom and caution. Some farmers use it more readily, others distrust it. Some towns regulate its sale or movement. Some people simply use whatever keeps crops alive another season. You watch the labourers spreading dark compost across the field in long rough lines. Steam rises faintly where the warm material meets cool rain air. There's a strange circle here. Food enters the town. People eat. Waste leaves the town. Waste feeds fields. Fields feed the town again. Medieval life loops endlessly through stomach, soil and season. A modern person standing comfortably inside a supermarket rarely thinks about this cycle. Medieval people cannot afford that luxury. The horse pulls steadily beside you while crows wheel overhead. One lands near the field and begins picking through freshly turned earth. The labourer shoos it away half-heartedly. Everyone out here looks tired in the same familiar way. Not dramatic suffering, just constant labour layered over years. One curious detail from agricultural history still surprises many people in some places. City waste became valuable enough that disputes arose over who controlled access to it. Fertilizer mattered. A growing town produced enormous amounts of material that nearby agriculture could potentially use. The boundary between refuse and resource depended heavily on context. A spoiled feast inside town becomes tomorrow's field nourishment. You glance toward a farmhouse standing low against the drizzle. Smoke escapes from a chimney. Chickens scratch beneath a cart. A child carries a bucket larger than his patience. Farm life begins early and ends late. People here measure time through weather, planting, harvest and livestock rather than bells and market schedules. Yet the countryside is not untouched by urban problems. Towns need fuel, food, leather, wool, timber and labour from surrounding villages. Villages depend on towns for trade tools, taxes and authority. Waste links them too. Your cart moving through the gate is part of that exchange, whether anyone likes admitting it or not. You remember overhearing an argument once between a farmer and a town official about dumping rights near a stream. The farmer claimed the runoff spoiled grazing land. The official insisted the designated area had been used for years. Both men smelled strongly of damp wool and stubbornness. The argument lasted long enough for rain to settle the matter temporarily by soaking everyone equally miserable. That may be the most democratic thing weather ever accomplishes. The fields around you show signs of careful management. Narrow strips divided among tenants, ditches cut for drainage, hedges marking boundaries. Medieval agriculture often relied on open field systems where villagers shared large divided fields, rotating crops and grazing land through community arrangements. Life depended on cooperation mixed with endless low-simmering disagreement. Because wherever humans cooperate, they also complain. Your partner scratches mud from his boot with a stick while the horse drinks from a shallow puddle. Nearby, the farmer spreading compost pauses to stretch his back. His spine cracks audibly enough to carry through the mist. That sound feels familiar. Labour shapes bodies across professions. Farmers stoop over fields, millers inhale dust. Smiths strain shoulders at the forge. You climb into pits, different trades, same weary bones. A faint, earthy sweetness drifts across the field from rotting straw and wet soil. Compared with the concentrated horror of a cesspit, the smell almost feels comforting now. That realization alarms you slightly. Your standards are adapting in dangerous directions. Researchers studying medieval farming continue to piece together how nutrients moved between towns and countryside before industrial fertilizers transformed agriculture. Written records reveal rents, harvests, disputes, and regulations, while archaeology fills gaps through pollen, soil traces, seeds, and waste deposits. The picture that emerges is not static. Some regions managed fertility carefully for centuries. Others struggled with exhausted land flooding, erosion, or poor harvests. The Middle Ages were deeply local. A rainy valley differs from dry uplands. Rich farmland differs from marginal soil. Prosperous years differ sharply from famine years. Yet across these differences, one truth persists. People understood that land must be replenished somehow. You think again about the town behind you. Its markets smell of fish, bread, onions, wool smoke, leather, sweat and dung. Its households produce endless scraps. Its privies fill steadily beneath respectable floors. And every few nights carts like yours carry the hidden remains outward into the wider landscape. There is something strangely intimate about that relationship between city and countryside. The people inside walls imagine themselves separate from muddy fields, but their lives depend completely upon them. Bread comes from those fields. Ale comes from those fields. Straw for bedding, oats for horses, vegetables for pottage, wool for cloaks. Even the waste from urban life circles back eventually to nourish next year's growth. Nothing disappears, it merely changes form. The rain finally weakens into mist. Low sunlight begins pressing through clouds in pale streaks. Wet earth glows dark brown beneath the dim light. Somewhere far off, a church bell carries faintly across the fields. You climb back onto the cart rail and flex your stiff fingers. Ahead, the road curves toward another cluster of cottages near the town edge. More privies wait there. More pits. More hidden labour beneath ordinary life. Behind you, the farmer continues spreading compost in patient rhythmic motions across the field. In a few months, green shoots will rise from that soil. Bread will return to the market. Families will eat. Waste will gather again beneath wooden seats in shadowed yards. And eventually, before dawn, you will come back for it. You turn back through the gate as the town gathers itself into full morning, and the first thing that greets you is smell. Not one smell. Never one. The town is a whole orchestra of odours, each instrument playing with great confidence and almost no concern for harmony. Smoke from hearth fires drifts low beneath overhanging roofs. Fresh bread rolls warm from bakery doors. Fish waits on wooden boards near the market, silver-skinned, and already losing its argument with the air. Horses steam in the street. Pigs root in corners. Wet wool, spilled ale onions, mud iron, leather, sweat and damp straw rise together until the very atmosphere feels woven from human activity. You walk beside the empty cartlighter now, though not exactly fresh. The load is gone, but the work remains in your clothes. Your cloak carries the pit. Your boots carry the yard. Your hands carry vinegar, rope and old wood. The town carries everything else. It's easy for a modern listener to imagine medieval streets as simply filthy, as if every lane were one continuous disaster. But the truth is more textured. Some smells are signs of danger or neglect. Others are signs of ordinary work. A bakery smells good because grain fuel labour and heat meet before dawn. A tannery smells dreadful because hides must be soaked, scraped, treated, and transformed into leather. A fish market smells sharp because food is perishable, and refrigeration is still a distant dream. Odour is information. Your nose reads the city before your eyes finish looking. You pass the baker's stall first, and for a few merciful moments the air turns kind. Bread, hot crust, yeast, toasted flour. A line has already formed. Apprentices press forward with coins. A woman balances a basket against her hip. The baker's arms are dusted white, his face red from oven heat. Behind him, stacked loaves glow in the morning like small edible suns. Then the breeze shifts. From a nearby side lane comes the smell of a blocked gutter. There it is, the old friend, stagnant water, rotting scraps, animal dung, and whatever a neighbour insisted was only wash water when clearly some optimism was involved. Street gutters in medieval towns often served as channels for rainwater and refuse, and keeping them clear was a constant challenge. When they worked, filth moved away. When they clogged, the lane became a shallow lesson in civic failure. A boy with a broom pushes straw and muck toward the middle of the street. He is young, serious, and already annoyed at the world. Perhaps his master sent him out before breakfast. Perhaps this is his daily chore. He scrapes, pauses, wrinkles his nose, then scrapes again. You recognize the posture. The body of someone learning early that cleanliness is temporary and adults are unreasonable. You move past him toward the market square where smells multiply. Here are vegetables, damp with soil, cabbages, split open leeks, onions, garlic, peas in season hisby, herbs tied in bunches, apples stored too long, eggs in baskets, cheese sweating softly beneath cloth. Here are chickens, alive chickens, dead feathers, straw, and the quick bitter smell of fear from penned animals. Here are butchers with blood darkening the boards. Though much slaughter may happen away from the most respectable fronts when officials insist. Here are fishwives calling prices over the wet slap of their goods. Here are customers squeezing, sniffing, arguing, judging freshness with practical suspicion. The medieval city smells because it is alive at close range. Nothing is sealed away. Work happens where people can see it, hear it, step around it, and complain about it. Tanners near streams use lime bark urine and labour to turn hides into leather, a process so pungent that many towns push them toward edges or downstream areas. Dyers boil cloth in vats of colour. Fullers clean and thicken wool, sometimes using stale urine because its ammonia helps remove grease. Yes, remember that when admiring fine medieval cloth. Elegance often has a backstage area with very poor ventilation. You pass a leather worker's yard and the air grows sharp enough to feel textured. Hides hang from frames. A dog sniffs too close and sneezes. Buckets stand near the wall, their contents best left unnamed before sleep. The craftsman barely looks up as you pass. His apron is stained, his hands strong, his expression calm. He belongs to the brotherhood of useful smells, tradespeople whose labour society needs and then politely locates downwind. There is an odd fellowship there, not friendship necessarily, more recognition. You, the gong farmer, understand the tanner better than the silk merchant ever will. You both know that comfort depends on unpleasant transformation. Waste into fertilizer, hide into leather, greasy wool into cloth, ash and fat into soap, flesh into food, rot into renewal. The town is not clean because it avoids filth. It survives because people handle filth in particular ways. Questions remain over how bad medieval streets smelled compared with early modern or industrial cities. Some writers from later periods exaggerated earlier filth to make their own reforms seem heroic. Others underplayed local problems because civic pride dislikes bad publicity. The safest answer is that smell varied constantly by neighbourhood, season, weather, trade, wealth and regulation. A cold, dry morning after street cleaning might be tolerable. A hot summer day near a clogged ditch and fish stalls might make even a saint reconsider patience. Today is damp, which softens some odours and deepens others. Smoke hangs lower, rot feels sweeter. Mud releases its breath under wheels. The empty cart behind you creaks like an old complaint. Near the church, incense drifts from the open door. Beeswax candles burn with a gentle honeyed scent. People step inside carrying the market on their clothes, the stable on their boots, the hearth in their hair. Sacred space does not erase the town. It gathers, it filters it through prayer and sends everyone back out again. A woman passes you holding a small bunch of herbs near her face, lavender, rosemary, perhaps rue. People use herbs in rooms, clothing, chests, sick rooms, churches and streets, not merely for pleasure, but because pleasant smells feel protective. Before germ theory, bad air is not just unpleasant, it is suspect. The nose becomes a guardian, imperfect but alert, if something smells wrong. Perhaps it is wrong, and very often, in fairness, it is. You pause beside a public well, keeping distance because your work clothes attract glances. Women wait with buckets, talking quietly. Water matters more than almost anything. Wells, conduits, rivers and springs shape neighbourhoods. A fouled water source can cause panic, anger and illness. Town rules often try to protect wells from waste, though enforcement depends on vigilance and local politics. Everyone needs clean water. Everyone produces things that threaten it. That tension runs beneath urban life like an underground stream. A cart of rushes passes bound for floor covering in a hall or household. Fresh rushes can sweeten a room, especially when mixed with herbs. Old rushes, if left too long, collect crumbs, spills, fleas, and tiny horrors best not invited into a bedtime mood. People replace them when they can. Again, cleanliness is not absent. It is continuous labour. You walk on as bells fade and market noise grows. The town's hidden smells are not only filth, they are evidence of bodies, trades, meals, animals, weather and effort. Every odour says something has happened, or is happening now. Bread rising, fish spoiling, hides curing, wool cleaning, pits filling, fires burning, water stagnating, soil clinging, people living too close together and somehow making a world. You return toward this next narrow lane where another household waits behind another closed gate. The city breathes around you, warm, sour, smoky, hungry, holy and human. The next yard you enter sits behind a narrow house near the edge of the market district. Rainwater drips steadily from the roof, tapping against a barrel beside the wall. The air smells of wet timber cabbage soup and old smoke. Familiar smells now, almost comforting in their own exhausted way. Almost. The woman who opens the gate keeps a cloth pressed near her nose as she speaks to you. Her eyes dart toward the privy with the tense expression of someone who suspects disaster but does not want confirmation. You know that look well. People fear sickness in ways both practical and mystical. A bad smell, a sudden fever, swollen glands, strange rashes, coughing blood, unexplained weakness. Medieval life is crowded with reminders that the body can betray itself quickly, and in towns like this, disease always feels nearby. You cross the yard slowly while the woman mutters about her youngest child being ill last winter. Bad air, she says softly, through the lane after the flooding. You nod because arguing would help no one. Besides, to medieval thinking, bad air is not foolishness. It is a serious explanation shaped by observation. Rotting matter smells foul. Swamps smell foul. Crowded alleys smell foul. People fall sick more often in such places. The conclusion seems reasonable without microscopes or laboratory science. The idea of miasma. The belief that corrupted air spreads disease influences medicine and urban thinking for centuries. People burn herbs, carry flowers, scatter rushes, improve drainage and avoid stagnant smells because scent and sickness seem connected. Sometimes these efforts accidentally help by improving cleanliness and ventilation. Sometimes they merely perfume the problem. You kneel beside the privy boards and test the wood carefully. Damp weather weakens everything. Your fingers trace cracks where rot has begun chewing through the grain. You can smell standing water beneath the stronger odour of the pit itself. Flooding worries townspeople for good reason. Heavy rain turns streets into channels carrying mud, dung waste of dead animals, kitchen scraps and run off together through crowded neighbourhoods. Wells can become contaminated. Ditches overflow. Latrines leak. Water that normally sustains life suddenly carries danger from house to house. Medieval communities may not know bacteria, but they absolutely notice patterns between filth crowding and sickness. A bell rings somewhere deeper in town. Not the ordinary call to prayer this time. Slower. You glance upward briefly. Funeral bells carry differently through damp air. Softer perhaps, but heavier too. Death is not rare here. Few people expect long, uninterrupted safety from illness. Children die, women die in childbirth. Workers die from injury, fever, winter, hunger, or infected wounds. Epidemics move through towns like storms through forests, uneven and terrifying. And then there is plague. Even long after the great outbreaks, memory remains. Stories linger in families and streets, doors marked, houses emptied, carts carrying bodies, priests overwhelmed, entire neighbourhoods altered by fear. The Black Death reshaped Europe in the 14th century with devastating force killing enormous portions of the population in many regions. Modern historians continue debating the precise spread patterns and environmental factors involved, but nobody disputes the scale of human shock it created. The fear of invisible corruption stays behind long after the worst waves pass. You lift the privy board slightly. Warm, damp air escapes upward immediately. Your lantern flame trembles. You wait. A thin cat appears along the fence, stepping delicately through puddles before pausing to stare at you with deep personal disappointment. Medieval towns are full of animals moving between human systems. Cats hunt rats near granaries and kitchens. Dogs scavenge. Pigs roam in some places despite repeated complaints and regulations. Chickens wander freely where they can. Disease travels through crowded ecosystems rather than neat categories. The woman at the doorway crosses herself quietly. Religion shapes responses to sickness as much as practical measures do. People pray to saints associated with healing. Processions move through streets during outbreaks. Some believe disease reflects divine anger, moral failure, unlucky alignments, corrupted air, foreign influence, or all of these together at once. Medieval explanations rarely separate physical and spiritual danger neatly. To live in this world is to feel vulnerable constantly. You begin lowering the bucket into the pit. The rope slides wet through your hands. Somewhere below, water drips steadily into the darkness. This pit smells sharper than the last one. Sour, overfull perhaps. You can almost taste the dampness in the back of your throat. There are records from certain towns showing Khmer attempts to regulate slaughterhouses, tanning areas, refuse dumping, and latrine maintenance, partly because authorities recognised that foul conditions threatened public well-being. They lacked modern epidemiology, yet they understood that unmanaged filth brought misery. Civic cleanliness was imperfect, uneven, and often reactive but not absent. A strange little detail survives in some plague era. Accounts people sometimes carried pomanders filled with herbs, resin flowers, or spices to defend themselves from dangerous air. Imagine wealthy citizens walking through fearful streets clutching silver perfume balls while trying desperately not to inhale death itself. Human beings have always reached for rituals when certainty fails them. You pull up the bucket slowly and empty it into a waiting tub. The woman watching from the doorway asks whether you think the smell has worsened recently. You hesitate. Part of your work is practical. Another part is theatrical. People want reassurance from someone who deals daily with pits and rot. You're not a physician, but experience gives your words weight in matters of foulness. Needs clearing, you say carefully. Too much standing below. She nods quickly, relieved to hear action rather than doom. That is another thing about fear. People can endure unpleasant truths more easily when given a task. Burn herbs, dig drainage, clear pits, pray, wash bedding, open shutters. Action steadies the mind. You continue working while rain taps softly against the fence. Your thoughts drift toward the city around you. Thousands of bodies breathing close together, fires smoking beneath low roofs, food spoiling in heat, wells shared by crowded households, fleas hidden in bedding, rats slipping beneath floors, children coughing through winter nights, waste hauled through muddy streets before dawn. And still life continues. Markets open, weddings happen, ale is poured, songs are sung, apprentices flirt badly, priests lecture, bakers rise before dawn. Human beings adapt even under constant threat because stopping entirely is impossible. The bucket rises again. Your arms ache, but the rhythm comforts you slightly now. Lift, empty, lower, repeat. Outside the yard, wagon wheels splash through puddles. Somewhere nearby a baby cries, then quiets. The town lives beside danger so long that danger becomes part of the background noise. Some scholars now question older assumptions that medieval people were simply ignorant about disease and hygiene. They point out how communities observed patterns, created rules, cleaned streets, isolated certain activities, and reacted pragmatically to outbreaks even without modern science. Their explanations differed from yours, certainly, but their fears were often grounded in careful observation of suffering. You finish sealing the tub and straighten slowly, feeling your back protest. The woman thanks you quietly from the doorway, though she still keeps her distance. Gratitude and caution exist together easily in this town. You step back into the lane where rainwater runs along the gutter, carrying straw ash and scraps toward the lower streets. The city smells damp and restless beneath the grey sky. Somewhere beyond the roofs, another bell begins to ring. You leave the dripping lane behind and continue deeper through the town where work hums from every corner like a hive too busy to notice its own exhaustion. The rain has eased at last, leaving roofs slick and streets streaked with mud. Smoke hangs low between buildings. Somewhere nearby, metal rings sharply beneath a hammer. Somewhere else, a woman shouts at a pig with the defeated tone of someone who has shouted at that same pig many times before. You are not the only labourer carrying the town's unpleasant burdens. That thought settles beside you as you guide the cart through another narrow street lined with workshops and cramped dwellings. Medieval cities survive through trades that respectable people often prefer not to spell watch or discuss at supper. Yet without those trades, daily life would collapse into hunger, cold filth and naked feet remarkably quickly. Ahead near a drainage ditch, a tanner bends over stretched hides hanging from wooden frames. The smell reaches you long before the sight does. Sharp, sour, wet. Animal and chemical together. Hides must be soaked, scraped, treated with lime, softened, cleaned and cured before becoming leather. The process uses vats, urine, bark, water knives and endless labour. The tanner's hands are stained dark. His apron shines with dampness. A dog sleeps nearby despite the odour, proving once again that dogs possess either heroic tolerance or no standards whatsoever. The tanner glances at your cart and gives the slightest nod. Professional recognition. Neither of you belongs to the perfumed world of silk merchants or well-scrubbed clergy. You both work in the borderland between necessity and disgust. Leather workers often live near water sources because their craft demanded washing and soaking. Town authorities sometimes push them toward outer districts because the smell offended wealthier residents. Civilization likes useful trades best when they happen somewhere else. You continue past him toward the butcher quarter. Now the air changes again. Warm blood, sawdust, fat, smoke, salt, animals shifting nervously in pens. Butchers stand with rolled sleeves beside hanging carcasses, while customers inspect cuts with practical concentration. Medieval butchery is direct in a way modern packaged meat carefully avoids. People know where food comes from because they can hear it, smell it, step around it. The butcher's apprentice scrapes blood into a bucket while trying unsuccessfully to avoid splashing his boots. You almost feel sympathy. Almost. Animal remains create constant work for towns. Bones, hides, offal, spoiled meat, feathers, and blood must go somewhere. Regulations often try to prevent butchers from dumping refuse directly into streets or waterways, though enforcement varied dramatically. One town may manage waste carefully. Another may simply hope the rain carries enough away before summer heat arrives. Near the market edge, a rag picker kneels beside a heap of discarded cloth, sorting scraps by texture and usefulness. Nothing valuable is wasted if someone can help it. Old cloth becomes patches, stuffing bandages, paper pulp, or cleaning rags. The rag picker's fingers move quickly despite the cold. Torn linen here, wool there, something too rotten to save tossed aside. You realise how much of medieval life depends on salvage. Broken things rarely disappear immediately. They circulate through lower and lower uses until finally even the rag picker gives up on them. Your own profession sits at the end of that chain, handling what no one else wishes to reclaim. A grave digger passes pushing a narrow cart with tools rattling inside. His cloak is dark with damp earth near the hem. You exchange another small nod. There is kinship there too. Different labour, same uneasy relationship with respectable society. Gravediggers, executioners, knackers, tanners, and gong farmers often occupied strange social positions, necessary but avoided, familiar with realities others preferred hidden. Some towns even restricted where certain trades could operate or live, partly because of smell, partly because of fear, status, or simple discomfort. Human communities have always organised themselves around invisible lines between clean and unclean labour. You wonder sometimes whether these men feel the same strange distance from ordinary life that you do. The tanner returns home carrying the smell of hides. The butcher carries blood beneath his nails. The gravedigger carries damp clay in his boots. You carry the pit. Perhaps every town has an unofficial brotherhood of workers who know too much about what lies beneath appearances. A little farther along, near a narrow alley, women sit plucking feathers from geese. The air fills with drifting white down. One woman laughs so hard at a joke that she snorts unexpectedly and nearly drops the bird in her lap. The others erupt into tired laughter. Life continues even beside ugly labour, especially beside ugly labour. That may be one of the most comforting truths in history. People joke while gutting fish, sing while hauling waste, flirt while sweeping refuse, complain while baking bread. Human beings defend themselves with ordinary conversation against the crushing fact that work never truly ends. A small detail survives in some medieval illustrations and accounts showing workers covering their noses with cloth or herbs during especially foul tasks. Whether it truly helped much is doubtful, but the gesture matters. People sought relief where they could find it. A sprig of rosemary, mint, lavender, or rue might offer comfort, even if the surrounding reality remained stubbornly terrible. You pass beneath an upper window where dyed wool hangs dripping in strips of red and blue. Colour brightens the lane despite the mud below. Dyers transform dull cloth into vivid trade goods through boiling vats. Minerals, plants, insects, and chemistry they understand through practice rather than scientific theory. The process stains hands, floors, drains, and sometimes entire sections of street. Medieval cities are far more colourful than modern imagination often assumes. Bright fabrics painted signs, banners, illuminated churches, market goods, and dyed garments flash against the dirt. Beauty and filth coexist comfortably here. You stop briefly near a public oven where heat pours outward in warm waves. Several households use communal baking facilities because maintaining a private oven is expensive and dangerous. Smoke blackens the stone arch above the entrance. A baker's assistant hauls split wood inside while sweating despite the cool air. The smells gather around you again in layers. Yeast, wet leather, wood smoke, dung, blood, rain, boiling dye, horse sweat, rotting cabbage leaves near the gutter, fresh parsley from a market basket. Human breath in crowded streets. The town smells alive because every trade leaves traces behind. Some modern historians caution against imagining medieval workers only as miserable victims trapped in filth. Many took pride in skill, craft, endurance, and usefulness despite difficult conditions. A butcher knows cuts and preservation. A tanner understands curing methods. A gong farmer judges pit stability and airflow. These are forms of expertise, even if polite society seldom celebrates them with poetry. You find that thought oddly comforting. The cartwheel splashes through a puddle, startling a pair of chickens into loud outrage. Nearby, a cooper shapes barrel staves with rhythmic hammer blows. Another essential trade, Without barrels, carts, pits, storage, transport ale, salted fish, and half the town's economy become impossible. Civilization is built from countless interlocking tasks, many dirty, repetitive, or invisible. You continue through the lane while workers shout, scrape, chop, hammer, wash, sweep, and curse around you. Every sound folds into the city's rough heartbeat. And beneath it all runs the same quiet truth. The cleaner and wealthier a household appears, the more unseen labour supports it from below. By late morning, the town has become too loud for secrets, and yet secrets are everywhere. They are tucked beneath floorboards, sealed in walls, scratched into account books, whispered beside market stalls, and sunk deep into pits where no one expects them to matter again. You know this better than most. Every cesspit you empty gives up not only waste but evidence. Not the grand evidence of kings and battles, not treaty seals or jewelled relics, but the small, stubborn facts of daily life. The facts people forget to hide because they never imagined anyone would look. You return to a yard where an older pit has partly collapsed along one side, exposing layers like a cut loaf. Dark bands of compacted material alternate with ash straw, broken pottery and clay. To you it is a work problem. To someone centuries later it will be a book written in smell and sediment. You crouch and study the exposed side while your partner fetches boards. The layers show different moments in the household's life. A thick grey band of ash may mark a winter of heavy fires. A cluster of fish bones might suggest fasting days or cheap meals near a market supply. Cherry stones appear in one layer, then vanish in the next as summer comes and goes. A broken jug rests sideways in the wall of the pit, its glazed surface still faintly green beneath grime. A royal chronicle may tell who sat on a throne. A privy pit may tell who ate cherries, who had worms, who drank from imported pottery, and who lost a shoe in deeply unfortunate circumstances. Both kinds of history are useful. One simply requires stronger gloves. Modern archaeology has transformed how people understand medieval life by examining sites like these. Cesspits, rubbish, dumps, drains and wells can preserve remains that written records ignore. Seeds reveal food habits. Pollen hints at plants nearby. Animal bones show butchery and diet. Parasite eggs indicate health problems. Pottery traces trade. Leather scraps reveal shoes, belts and repairs. Even mineral stains in soil can show repeated use, dampness or decay. You do not know those future methods, of course. You only know that pits remember. You pry loose a pottery fragment and turn it in your hand. It is smooth on one side, rough on the other, with a curved edge suggesting it belonged to a jug. Perhaps it poured ale at a table where apprentices joked too loudly. Perhaps it held watered wine for a merchant with pretensions. Perhaps it cracked during washing and was tossed into the privy, because no one wanted shards cutting feet in the yard. The object does not confess, it simply exists. Nearby your scoop catches on something leathery. You pull gently and uncover part of an old shoe. The sole is worn thin, patched once near the heel, then discarded. Shoes are intimate objects. They remember the pressure of a foot, the bend of a walk, the mud of streets, the distance between home and work. A patched shoe means someone tried to extend its life. A worn sole means someone walked more than they rode. In a world where most people move by foot, footwear is not fashion first. It is survival. A slightly funny discovery from medieval digs is just how often single shoes turn up in wet deposits. Not pairs, singles. One lonely shoe, abandoned to mud pit or riverbank, as if history itself keeps misplacing footwear. Somewhere in the past, a person limped home annoyed, and centuries later a scholar became very excited about it. Life is unfair in both directions. You toss the shoe into a separate sack for anything that might be reused, sold, or at least inspected. The collapsed pit smells stronger now that its side is open. Warm, damp air seeps from the layers. Flies gather instantly, efficient little citizens of decay. You wave them away and continue clearing. Your work is practical, but your mind lingers on what these buried things reveal. Diet, for example, is more varied than simple stereotypes allow. Yes, many ordinary people eat bread, pottage, ale, onions, beans, peas, and seasonal vegetables. But urban diets can include fish meat when affordable cheese eggs, fruit nuts, spices and imported goods depending on wealth and access. Religious fasting rules affect what people eat on certain days. Markets bring in regional variety. Ports connect distant tastes. Even humble households may experience occasional treats. The pit records the gap between what people should eat, what they can afford, and what they actually consume. Health appears too, though, in quieter ways. Parasite eggs preserved in cesspit deposits can show infections from worms that lived in human bodies. That is not a comforting thought, so let it drift gently past like a tiny awful boat. Such evidence helps future researchers understand sanitation, diet and disease. It also reminds us that medieval discomfort was often internal as well as external. A person might appear healthy enough while carrying invisible burdens from contaminated food, water or soil. You scrape another layer and find nutshell fragments. Hazelnuts perhaps. Small things, but important. Nuts store well and provide fat and energy. A few shells in a pit could mean gathered food from nearby woods market purchases, or simply a household snack tossed aside. The smallest remains often speak most clearly, because nobody bothered to fake them. There is a continuing argument among specialists about how far one can use a single cesspit to describe an entire household. A pit might mix materials from several families, receive rubbish brought from elsewhere, or be cleaned and refilled over years. A rich deposit can tempt overconfidence. Still, when combined with buildings records and many other sites, these dark little archives become astonishingly powerful. You shift the lantern and examine the pit wall again. Here is a cluster of fish bones. Here a bit of green-glazed pottery. Here ash. Here a pin darkened by corrosion. Here seeds smaller than crumbs. A whole world reduced to fragments, yet still speaking. You think of the people above. Perhaps the merchant's wife dropping fruit stones into a bowl, a servant sweeping scraps from a table, a child sneaking roasted nuts, an apprentice hurrying to the privy with a loose buckle, a cook scraping burnt pottage into refuse. None of them imagines that their habits will outlive their names. Most people in history leave no portrait, no signature, no carved tomb, no careful biography, but they leave traces. A cracked bowl, a fishbone, a patch on a shoe, a parasite egg too small for them ever to see, a toy wheel, a spoon bent in the dark. Evidence does not care about status as much as people do. That thought feels almost kind. Your partner calls from above that the boards are ready. The pit must be stabilized before more work continues. You stand slowly, joints protesting, and step back from the collapsed side. The exposed layers glisten in the lantern light. They are ugly, yes, repellent certainly, but also strangely tender. They hold the leftovers of living people who woke, ate, worried, laughed, worked, fell ill, mended shoes, lost things, and tried again the next morning. You lower your scoop and breathe shallowly. The town above keeps moving, unaware that its forgotten pieces are resting below like buried whispers. Night comes again before your work truly ends. The town changes character after sunset. Daylight noise fades into pockets of sound scattered through the dark. Tavern laughter spills from doorways. Dogs bark behind fences. Somewhere a baby cries and refuses all negotiation. Bells mark the hours with patient certainty while smoke settles low across the streets. Lantern light flickers against wet stones, and the city begins hiding itself once more. This is your proper hour. You pull your cloak tighter and guide the cart through a narrow lane barely wide enough for the wheels. Rain earlier in the day has left the ground slick and uneven. Water gathers in shallow hollows, reflecting fragments of moonlight between the buildings. Above you, upper floors lean toward one another, like tired old men whispering gossip. The household waiting tonight belongs to an innkeeper near the river quarter. You know the place already. Busy yard, cheap ale, loud customers, too many travellers and not enough patience. Inns produce astonishing amounts of waste because they compress strangers together beneath one roof. Drinking, eating, sleeping chamber pot, stable, muck kitchen, scraps, spilled beer, muddy boots, and human carelessness all combine into a thriving ecosystem of exhaustion. The innkeeper meets you at the gate holding a lantern low near his boots. Full again, he mutters. Of course it is. The smell drifting from the rear yard could guide ships through fog. You step inside while stable boys move restlessly around nervous horses nearby. Steam rises from animal bodies into the cold air. Somewhere upstairs, men argue over dice. A woman laughs loudly, then coughs hard enough to rattle the silence afterward. You have entered another long night. The privy here sits behind the stable wall beneath a sagging roof. Heavy use has worn the wooden seats smooth in places. Mud surrounds the entrance, despite fresh straw scattered over the ground. The pit below must be deep because the innkeeper delayed calling you again as long as possible. They always do. Every household waits 1 week too long. You kneel and test the boards. Solid enough. Your partner unloads the tools while you light the lantern carefully. Flame blooms gold against the damp darkness. Rope, hooks, buckets, scoop. Familiar companions now. The ritual repeats so often that your hands move before thought catches up. Lift the boards. Check the air. Listen. Wait. A strange bubbling sound rises softly from below, followed by thick warmth rolling upward against your face. The smell is powerful even by your standards. Beer rot human waste, damp straw and stable runoff together in one overwhelming breath. You lean back instinctively. The innkeeper notices and mutters a quick prayer under his breath. Busy taverns and inns often became trouble spots in crowded towns. Travellers carried unfamiliar illnesses. Horses produced huge amounts of manure. Shared sleeping spaces spread fleas, lice, and coughs with alarming efficiency. Add overflowing privies and careless dumping, and the result could turn ugly quickly. Medieval officials watched such places carefully, especially during outbreaks of disease or periods of heavy travel. Your lantern flame steadies after a nervous flicker. Good enough. You lower the ladder first this time, because the pit is too deep for safe footing otherwise. The wood creaks while disappearing into darkness. You grip the side rails tightly and begin descending once again into the hidden underworld beneath ordinary life. The walls here are lined partly with brick, though sections have cracked under pressure. Moisture beads across the surface in greasy streaks. You smell beer strongly now. Travellers drink heavily, and the pit remembers every cup. Halfway down, your boot slips slightly on the rung. Your heart jolts hard enough to wake every nerve in your body. You recover immediately, pressing yourself against the wall, while the lantern swings wildly beside you. Shadows leap across the bricks. Thick liquid below shifts with a soft sucking noise. For one awful moment you imagine falling entirely in, not the dramatic death of songs and legends, just slipping quietly beneath layers of human waste while drunk travellers snore overhead. History can be deeply disrespectful sometimes. You steady your breathing and continue downward more carefully. At the bottom, the pit feels warmer than the night outside. Heat gathers from decomposition and trapped air. Your lantern reveals floating scraps of straw, greasy patches, and dark, thick layers compacted beneath newer waste. The stable nearby has clearly contributed runoff because the smell carries sharp animal notes beneath the human stench. You begin working immediately. Scoop, lift, fill the bucket, signal upward. The rope tightens and the load rises slowly toward the surface. Above, the inn continues living its noisy little life. Boots stomp overhead, tankards strike tables. Someone begins singing badly. Another voice joins even more badly. The sound filters down through the boards above your head until the pit feels like the cellar of civilization itself. One fascinating little detail from surviving tavern records and archaeological digs is how much evidence inns leave behind. Broken cups, gaming pieces, butchered animal bones, imported drink containers, and lost coins appear frequently in waste deposits near busy lodging houses. Travellers carried objects, accents, habits, and diseases across regions, and inns collected traces of all of them like muddy crossroads. Your scoop catches on something hard. You reach carefully into the muck and pull free a small carved bone die stained dark with filth. One corner is chipped. Someone upstairs likely cursed terrible luck while losing it months ago. Now it sits in your palm beside the lantern glow, absurdly delicate after so much ugliness. You tuck it into your pouch. The work grows heavier as the deeper layers emerge. Older material compacts densely beneath weight and moisture. Your shoulders burn and your lower back tightens painfully every time you lift the scoop. Sweat drips beneath your cap despite the cold night above. The ladder creaks whenever you glance upward. You try not to think about it too much. Outside the pit, your partner coughs repeatedly while hauling buckets. Stable boys complain about the smell. The innkeeper mutters about customers already asking when the privy will reopen. Nobody thanks you yet. They only want completion. That is another truth about invisible labour. Success means people stop noticing the problem. A rat scurries along the wall near your shoulder and vanishes into a crack between bricks. You barely react anymore. That realization troubles you slightly. Once the sight of a rat in a cesspit would have horrified you. Now it barely interrupts your rhythm. Human beings adapt too well. The lantern dims suddenly. Your stomach tightens. You raise it higher and watch carefully. The flame shrinks, wavering weakly before recovering slightly. Bad air gathering. You know the warning signs now with painful familiarity. You shout upward for a pause and climb halfway up the ladder to breathe cleaner air near the opening. Cool night wind brushes your face like mercy itself. Above you, clouds move across the moon. Tavern light spills from a nearby window. Someone laughs at a joke you cannot hear. Life above, danger below. You rest only briefly before descending again, because the work still waits unfinished. The town depends on this rhythm repeating night after night. Buckets rising through darkness. Wheels creaking through alleys. Hidden pits emptied before respectable morning returns. And somewhere beneath the innkeeper's yard, knee-deep in warmth and shadow, you continue lifting the city out one bucket at a time. By the time you leave the inn-yard, the eastern sky has begun to pale. Night loosens its grip slowly over the town. The darkest hours are gone, though. Sunrise has not fully arrived. Everything feels suspended between exhaustion and renewal. Tavern doors close one by one. Lanterns dim behind shutters. Rainwater glimmers silver in the gutters. The streets, briefly quieter, now seem to exhale after enduring another crowded night. You walk beside the cart with aching legs and stiff shoulders, while your horse plods forward through mud that never quite dries. Every movement reminds you of the hours spent underground. Your palms burn from rope friction. Your knees complain each time the road dips. A soreness settles deep into your spine like an unwelcome tenant who has signed a lifetime lease. And yet dawn carries relief. Not joy exactly. Your trade is not built for joyful exits, but relief that the pits are emptied, the barrels sealed, the ladders packed away. Relief that the lantern never failed completely. Relief that the walls held. Relief that you climbed back out. That counts for something. The city at dawn looks softer than it does at noon. Chimneys breathe thin smoke into pale air. Church towers rise dark against a whitening sky. Market stalls stand empty for a few precious moments before another day begins grinding through trade and argument. Cats prowl confidently across alleys as though they personally own every rooftop in Europe. You pass a bakery where the ovens already glow. Warm bread scent slips through the cold air and wraps around you gently. For one moment it almost overpowers the smell clinging to your clothes. Almost. The baker's apprentice yawns while stacking fresh loaves in rows. His face shines with heat and flour dust. He barely glances your way. Perhaps that is a kindness. A few earlier workers move through the streets now. Water carriers, table hands. Women heading toward market with baskets balanced carefully against their hips. A fisherman pushing a cart toward the river. Everyone looks half awake, wrapped in cloaks against the damp morning chill. You realize something strange. At this hour nobody appears respectable yet. Without full daylight and public bustle, the difference between trades softens slightly. Everyone smells of work, smoke, sweat, damp wool or tiredness. The merchant has not yet put on his polished face. The priest has not yet begun formal duties. The tavern keeper has not yet swept away the night's chaos. Dawn reveals the town before performance fully resumes. That feels honest somehow. You stop briefly beside a public fountain to splash water over your hands. The cold bites sharply against cracked skin. Dirt swirls away in thin grey ribbons. Not all of it, of course. Some stains settle too deeply for quick washing. But the gesture matters. Workers clean themselves as best they can whenever possible. Medieval people are not strangers to washing. Bathhouses operate in many towns at different periods. Households heat water for basins. Laundresses work endlessly beside rivers and tubs, and people understand the comfort of cleanliness even when achieving it completely proves difficult. You scrub at your wrists harder than necessary. The smell remains. Your partner laughs softly. No river big enough, he mutters. He may be right. A curious little story circulates among labourers about a gong farmer who once attended a festival after bathing 3 times, rubbing himself with rosemary and mint, and borrowing a cleaner tunic from his cousin. According to the tale, a woman finally agreed to dance with him until a drunk stable boy recognised him and shouted his profession across the square, whether true or invented. The story survives because everyone understands the cruel joke beneath it. Some trades follow a man even after washing. You continue walking. The sky brightens from charcoal to grey pearl. Birds begin shouting from rooftops with entirely unreasonable enthusiasm. A cart rattles across stone somewhere ahead. Bells ring for morning prayer. Life gathers itself again, and already the town is forgetting you. That forgetting happens quickly. By full daylight, respectable citizens will step into freshly swept shops and tidy halls without considering the labour performed beneath them overnight. The privy works again. The lane smells slightly better. The overflowing pit no longer threatens disaster. Problem solved. Invisible work succeeds by disappearing. Streets others ignore. Back alleys behind kitchens, service gates near monasteries, yard entrances beside taverns, drainage ditches near workshops, the hidden map beneath public life. A noble visitor may admire towers and market squares while never noticing the workers moving quietly before dawn to keep those spaces functional. Yet the city depends on these hidden systems more than it admits. A growing number of modern historians now focus on ordinary labourers rather than only kings' battles and nobles. Archaeology, tax rolls, court records, household accounts, and city regulations reveal how deeply urban life relied on workers whose names rarely survive. Street cleaners, water carriers, laundresses, stable boys, carters, ditch diggers, tanners, cooks, brewers, and gong farmers held the machinery of daily existence together through repetition rather than glory. The past becomes much more crowded once you begin looking downward instead of upward. You turn into a narrower lane near your own district now. The houses here are smaller. Roofs sag slightly. Smoke escapes through patched chimneys. A woman empties wash water carefully into the gutter while watching you pass with tired eyes. She does not recoil dramatically. Perhaps she knows you already. Perhaps poverty leaves less energy for pretending certain work does not exist. Your home waits ahead. Not grand, not specially clean, but yours. A single room, perhaps, or two, if fortune has smiled unusually well. Straw mattress, small chest, rough table, a few cooking pots, maybe a shelf with a candle stub and wooden bowl. The kind of place built for sleeping more than lingering. But before reaching it, you pause once more at the edge of the waking street. Dawn light spreads slowly across wet cobbles. Steam rises from horses near the stable yard. Bakers call to early customers. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs for reasons entirely unrelated to cesspits labour or municipal waste. The sound catches you unexpectedly. Life continues with astonishing stubbornness. You think of the countless people above the pits you emptied. Travellers asleep in the inn, servants relighting fires, merchants counting coins, children dropping crumbs, priests preparing prayers, lovers whispering beneath blankets, all of them producing the endless ordinary evidence of living. And below them, hidden in darkness, workers like you move quietly through the city's underworld, carrying away what everyone else wishes forgotten. The sky grows brighter. Soon full morning will arrive and the town will become noisy again. Carts, bells, shouting, trade prayer arguments, dogs, smoke and market smells rising together beneath daylight. Another day beginning above layers of buried labour. You finally turn toward home boots scraping softly against wet stone, while behind you the city wakes clean enough to pretend it managed itself through the night. You reach home just as the town fully wakes behind you. The door sticks slightly in its frame from damp weather, and you shoulder it open with the weary precision of someone who has done this too many mornings to count. Inside the room greets you with darkness, stale warmth, and the familiar smell of smoke soaked into wooden cloth over many winters. Compared with the pits, it smells wonderful. You set down your tools first. Always the tools first. The rope goes in its corner beside the buckets. The lantern rests carefully on the table after the flame is pinched out between damp fingers. Your scoop leans against the wall, stained from years of work despite endless rinsing. Each object carries scratches, dents and repairs that map your trade more honestly than words ever could. Outside wheels rattle across the street when someone calls for fresh bread. A dog barks once and loses interest in the matter. Morning gathers strength with every passing minute. But in here, for a little while, there is still quiet. You remove your cloak slowly. Damp wool peels away from aching shoulders. The smell rises immediately trapped in the folds of cloth. You hang it near the door where air might persuade it toward improvement, though. Experience suggests optimism should remain modest. Your hands sting as you pour water from a small pitcher into a basin. The water is cold enough to hurt. You wash anyway. Dark streaks swirl through the basin while you scrub your fingers, wrists, face and neck. Dirt clings stubbornly beneath your nails. Rope burns across your palms in red lines. Your knuckles are swollen slightly from labour and cold weather together. This is the part no one imagines when they think about medieval work. Not only the great dramatic hushes, but the endless small discomfort. Chapped skin, damp boots, smoke in the lungs, aching joints, splinters, poor sleep, repeated strain. History lives in the body long before it reaches books. You sit heavily on the edge of the bed and pull off your boots. The relief is immediate and almost holy. Steam rises faintly from wet leather near the hearth. Your socks are damp. Of course they are. Medieval feet spend much of life negotiating moisture in one form or another. A little loaf of coarse bread waits on the table beside a wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. Nothing luxurious. Still, after a night underground, even plain food feels reassuringly solid. Bread means grain survived harvest. Cheese means animals were healthy enough to milk. Simple meals carry whole systems behind them. You eat slowly while morning light begins creeping through cracks in the shutters. And now at the end of another long night, your thoughts wander. You think about the city outside, about all the hidden labour stitched into its survival. Bakers feeding ovens before dawn. Stable hands brushing horses by lantern light. Women hauling water through cold streets. Carters hauling woodfish stone grain ale. Laundresses kneeling beside rivers until their hands crack raw from winter water. Sweepers clearing market filth. Bell ringers climbing towers. Gravediggers turning wet earth. And you, down in the pits beneath them all. It would be easy for someone centuries later to laugh at medieval sanitation, to imagine the entire age as one endless swamp of ignorance and smell. But the truth is quieter and more human than that. People tried constantly to manage their surroundings with the tools and knowledge available to them. They built drains, dug pits, passed ordinances, swept streets, moved waste protected pests, spread herbs, repaired gutters, and argued endlessly about responsibility. Some efforts worked better than others. Some failed as spectacularly, but nobody simply sat inside filth smiling proudly about it. That matters. You remember the merchant's worried face, the servant carrying chamber pots before sunrise, the farmer spread compost in damp fields, the tavern keeper muttering prayers over his overflowing pit, the child staring curiously at your cart before his mother pulled him away, an entire society balancing itself above hidden holes in the earth. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes briefly. Your body hums with exhaustion now that movement has stopped. The kind of exhaustion that feels almost heavy enough to hear. Outside footsteps pass the house. Voices drift faintly through the street. Somewhere nearby a hammer begins tapping steadily against wood. The day belongs to others now. You think about the objects you have found over the years. Coins blackened by damp, broken spoons, cracked pottery, tiny leather shoes, fruit stones, dice, pins, buckles, lost scraps of ordinary lives. Not treasures in the grand heroic sense, better than treasures perhaps, real things touched by forgotten hands. Most people vanish from history quietly. No portraits, no monuments, no songs, just fragments left behind in places nobody respectable wanted to look. And yet those fragments endure. A cherry stone beneath a medieval privy seat may outlast a king's proclamation. A child's toy wheel may survive longer than a merchant's reputation. A worn shoe sole can tell future generations more about labour than a noble feast ever could. You smile faintly at the thought, then wince because your shoulders object to unnecessary movement. A pale stripe of sunlight reaches across the floorboards now, dust floats through it lazily. The room grows warmer by degrees. Outside the city is fully awakened. Market cries rise faintly through the morning air. Horses clatter past. Bells ring again. Soon the pits will begin filling once more. That is the strange comfort of your work. However unpleasant it becomes, the rhythm remains steady. Eat, sleep, work, carry, empty, repeat. Human life moving in circles through seasons, streets and generations. And beneath all the noise of kings and wars and sermons and trade, the body continues its ordinary demands. Always! You lie back carefully onto the straw mattress. It rustles beneath you with familiar softness. Your hands still smell faintly of vinegar despite everything. Outside, rainwater drips slowly from the roof edge after the long damp night. The room dims behind your tired eyes. You picture the town settling into daylight above its hidden underworld. Bread baking, market stalls opening, children running through alleys, smoke lifting into pale skies, privy doors creaking quietly in shadowed yards. Somewhere beneath those yards, deep in the earth, layers of forgotten lives waiting silently in darkness. And somewhere above them, you finally rest. The sounds outside soften gradually. Ooh. Footsteps blur into distant rhythm. Voices fade. The city continues breathing around you, warm and crowded, and endlessly human, while sleep rises slowly at the edges of your thoughts like mist over wet cobblestones at dawn. The town grows quieter in your mind now, softer around the edges, as though the rain has washed the sharpness from the stones and smoke alike. You lie still beneath a rough blanket while the last of the morning light drifts gently across the wooden wall and beyond the shuttered window. The city continues its endless turning without asking anything more from you tonight. The ovens will keep glowing. The market will keep shouting. The bells will continue marking the hours with patient certainty. And beneath it all, hidden under yards and streets and old timber houses, the deep earth will go on holding the traces of countless ordinary lives, layer upon layer, century upon century, quiet now beneath the sleeping town. Your tired hands finally unclench. The ache in your shoulders loosens little by little. The smell of smoke from the hearth settles into the room with a warmth that feels almost comforting after the cold lanes and damp pits of the long night. Outside, somewhere very far away now, a cart rolls over cobblestones. A dog barks once. Then even those sounds begin to drift away. You think briefly of the narrow streets shining after rain of lantern light, trembling against wet walls of bread warming in ovens before dawn of hidden courtyards and soft morning mist above the fields beyond the gate. And strangely, after everything, the medieval town no longer feels harsh alone. It feels human, messy and weary and crowded and alive. A place of labour and noise and stubborn survival where unseen people carried unseen burdens, so the world above them could wake each morning and begin again. Your breathing slows. The city fades gently into darkness behind your eyes, And at last, with the bells growing distant and the rainwater dripping softly from the roof beyond your window, sleep comes quietly for you too. Sweet dreams.